Welcome to the public meeting of the Princeton Board of Education. Our mission is to prepare all of our students to lead lives of joy and purpose as knowledgeable, creative, and compassionate citizens of a global society. The board is an elected, unpaid group of 10 citizens who set policy and make decisions on educational, financial, and personnel matters for the Princeton Public Schools on behalf of all residents. We are always pleased when members of the community attend our meetings. The board and the school district operate under applicable New Jersey laws and under regulations of the New Jersey State Board of Education. Each meeting includes an opportunity for those attending to comment on items on the published agenda or other matters of interest to them. The board reserves the right to limit the time allotted to public participation. Law limits discussion of individual personnel and confidential matters. We desire that our meetings provide useful opportunities for communication between the board and the community. Thank you for attending. As required under the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice was given for calling this meeting. It was authorized by the Board of Education and forwarded to the municipal clerk, Princeton Packet, and the Times on January 10th, 2019. I don't know that that's the correct date, and distributed to the schools and others on the standard distribution list. The board reserves the right to enter into executive session during all meetings of the Board of Education. Board Policy 2230, recording devices, requires that we inform those attending this meeting that the proceedings are being recorded on video. This meeting is being recorded on video and may also be live streamed. The representatives of the sending district is authorized to vote on such matters that affect the sending district students or affect the governance of the Princeton Public Schools as more specifically designated in New Jersey law. In the event that the law differs or is amended, the law shall take precedence over the bylaws. Sending district votes pertaining to personnel actions refer to high school, central administrative, and district-wide staff only. Votes otherwise are considered as abstentions. Mr. Venanzi, could we take a roll call, please?
Beth Barron.
Here.
Greg Sankovitz.
Here.
Betsy Baglio.
Here.
Debbie Bronfeld.
Here.
Daniel Dart.
Present.
Jessica Deutsch.
Here.
Bill Hare.
Here.
Brian McDonald.
Present.
Michelle Tuck-Ponder.
Present.
Evelyn Spahn. Allie Rounds and Sam Harshberger are absent.
The first item of business is the adoption of minutes for April 23rd, 2019. Could I have a motion? Jess Deutsch, second. Brian, thank you. All in favor? Can I have a show of hands? Motion passed, unanimous. The second item on the agenda is the affirmation of an HIB case. Can I have a motion? Greg Stankiewicz, second. Dan Dart. All in favor? Oh, shall we do a roll call on this one, Tom?
Yeah, let me just catch up to you. Okay. Beth Barron.
No.
Debbie Bronfeld.
Yes.
Daniel Dart.
No.
Jessica Deutsch.
No.
Bill Hare.
No.
Betsy Baglio.
Abstain.
Brian McDonald.
Yes.
Greg Stankiewicz.
Yes.
Michelle Tuck-Ponder.
No.
Evelyn Spahn.
Abstain.
Motion's defeated.
The next item is the president's report. My report.
That's you.
That's me. Okay. Welcome, and thank you for your interest and your support in the Princeton Public Schools, and we appreciate that you're here at our budget hearing and that you're listening at home. The primary role of the board is to promote the welfare and academic achievement of our almost 4,000 students, and that's a really tall order. We're responsible for our children from pre-K when they walk in the door to the time that they walk across the stage at the PHS on the front lawn. And we have to do that within the financial means available to the community and to us from the state. So this year, in order to do this, we're here to talk about our budget, and we had to make some difficult choices. And I just want to say briefly that we're very grateful to our administration, to Steve Cochran and his staff for all the work that they've done over the last couple of months. It's been a very difficult process. And I think that everyone around this table takes very seriously our obligation to plan ahead and to do this budget and to plan ahead for future budgets. And in particular, given the issues that we had this year and some of the structural questions we have going forward in terms of being able to fund fund our schools and keep them going in the way that we're accustomed, in the way that our children deserve, we are going to be needing to encourage more creative and innovative and careful use of our resources so that we can continue to deliver the education that our children deserve. So I just want to say we take our role very seriously, and this is a tough decision for us this year with the budget. It's the first time since 2008 that we've had to make staff reductions. And so we are grateful again to our administration, to our staff, and to our community for supporting us through this process. Mr. Cochran?
Okay. This week happens to be Teacher Appreciation Week. And so I'm going to do something a little bit different with my superintendent's remarks. Teaching to me is the hardest, the most important, and the most rewarding job on the planet. And I would like to ask, in honor of those teachers that we have in our district and in honor of the teachers that we've experienced in our lives, for this board, for those of you in the audience here, those of you watching at home, to think for a moment about a teacher who has made a difference in your life. Who were they? What did they do? What is a moment you remember from your time in their classroom? And I want you to actually turn to someone next to you and talk about that person. So feel free to go ahead and do that now.
Where do I start? My civics teacher.
My mind.
He told the story of American history. When he tried to do a week in newspaper. Understandable. And it taught me I developed a love of reading.
Stories about
Newspaper.
I got a case of the slow.
But you didn't really do until that. So I was grateful.
About so many things. It was like listening to someone tell you bedtime stories. I remember everything.
Wow. Does that make you go into law school? Is that one of the things that what? You read my thing about Mrs. Lee? Yes. So she sticks out for me because she really did differentiate for us. Like it was like you could do whatever. Like, she allowed me to write poetry and just celebrated whatever we did as individuals in that class. And that's always stuck with me. Just how she brought us together as a class, and then we were all, but allowed us to be ourselves at the same time. Okay, lots of conversation around the table and out there, which is wonderful. So I'll start with our board members. What were some of the stories you heard? What were some of the commonalities of the experiences that you had with these teachers who made a difference in your lives? Do you want to share?
I think the common thread in what the stories that we shared are small gestures that all these years later feel like they happened yesterday because they were so important. Third grade and kindergarten we were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, remember it still. Others?
Well, also I had a great civics teacher my freshman year in high school who developed my interest in government. I'm a late bloomer, so I didn't get to it till recently. But I remember, and it was a very impactful period, and very fond memories of that, developing that interest.
Yep. Brian?
I would just say that I quickly turned to Dan, and we each had a person in mind, and
Yeah.
smiles on our faces. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw that everybody else there, I didn't notice anybody kind of like, let me think about
Yeah.
that, you know, and the thinking was probably about not which one, but which one am I going to talk about? Who made such a big difference.
Yeah. Want to share? Anybody else?
Okay. Well, I mean, for me, it's every one of the teachers I think about are teachers that really focused on me and made me feel important and made me feel that I was known. And so that's why when we talk about making sure that every child is known, that resonates for me.
All right.
I would just add, my teachers were my role models. That is why I became a teacher. And they were always in my head. When I was in the front of my first class, I taught sixth grade, I was 21 years old, and I was like, oh, I'm the teacher now. Like, I'm like all of these wonderful role models I had, and so I still feel like I carry them with me.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. And thank you all for thinking about that and continue to do that throughout this week. Continue to think about the people and the experiences and the great lessons that that you were taught. I know I shared yesterday with the staff here in the district the memories I had of my third grade teacher, Mrs. Lee, who really understood about differentiated instruction before people even talked about differentiated instruction as an educational buzzword. And she had us singing and acting in plays and doing hands-on activities in math and reading stories of our own choosing. She really celebrated us as individuals, and she also had that magic ability to bring us together as a class. And I shared the story of when we all sat on the carpet reading. She was reading aloud Charlotte's Web, and got to that passage at the very end when Charlotte dies. And as a 9-year-old, I wasn't expecting, or 8-year-old, I wasn't expecting that, and I started to tear up. And then I looked up, and I wasn't alone, like the whole class. And so she got that box of Kleenex and she passed it around, and we all took one, and then she took one, and we bonded. And I never forgot that. And I reflect on how great teaching, it's not just about content. It's about embedding that content in deep emotion and relationship. And the best teachers continue to do that. They recognize that learning is a social activity, and so I applaud our great teachers in this district, the ones who are committed with their intellect and always learning new content and learning new teaching strategies. In creating lessons and then recreating those same lessons, who are committed with their emotions and the way they get to know students and families and bring them together and create a sense of welcome in their class and in the school. And I thank our teachers for their time, which I know extends onto weekends and late nights. And it's time for assessing student learning. It's time for increasing their own learning with the reading they're doing and the webinars. It's time for coaching and advising and attending events, and we're just incredibly appreciative of the work that our teachers do. It is the hardest job in the world, and it is the most rewarding, and we are blessed to have really amazing teachers here in the Princeton Public Schools. And so with that, you can clap for all of our teachers. So now I'm going to tell you the story of Professor Shabatar. So this is the professor of one of my graduate school courses entitled Fund Accounting in Nonprofit Organizations. Yeah. See, Tom, you probably loved that course. But I come to graduate school, I was an English major, like fund accounting in nonprofit organizations. I was going on to, this is a school of education. This was not the course that I wanted to take. But first day of class, Kent Shabatar stood there and he said, "Numbers tell a story." So for me as a former English major, I could resonate with this, the idea that the numbers on a balance sheet, they actually speak to an organization's values, the priorities they have. And so as we turn now to our budget story, and the report that Tom is going to walk us through, I want us to keep that in mind, that the story we're telling, the budget tells here in Princeton, it is a story of fiscal constraints and challenge, but it's also needs to be the story of creative opportunities for. It's grounded, our budget has to be grounded in our values of partnership, values of innovation, values of care. We are not going to solve problems by ourselves. We have to come together. We're not going to solve them by doing things the way we always have. We have to think about approaching things in new ways. And we have to be kind to each other. In times of tight fiscal resources, there is a danger of beginning to sort of point fingers at one another and say, we could have more for this program if you had less. And the goal for me and for my administrative team, and I think for the board, has been one of how do we continue to move us forward together as a district to innovate and to provide meaningful, exciting learning experiences for our kids, even as we contend with some of these fiscal constraints. And I look at a district that changed the start time at the high school, that created longer periods for more in-depth learning. I look at a district that has implemented writing workshop as well, K through 8, that we just approved the implementation of a new math program for next year, an exciting new math program. We're moving forward with courses in racial literacy and science research. We are continuing to lift the bar for our kids and for ourselves, and we will continue to do that. And so the budget has to be a story of how we creatively move our district forward together, even as we are realistic about the constraints we're facing. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tom for our budget hearing.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you for the opportunity to present the story on our 1920 budget. This is our legal requirement to conduct a public hearing on the 2019-20 budget. First thing I'd like to cover with you tonight is the budget process that we've used, which actually starts all the way back in October. Where the school administration starts to get involved with their requests. And that is a lengthy process leading up to the administrative review, which, as you can see, is a pretty lengthy process as well. For those of you that don't know, I came in at the tail end of that process when we had about a $1.2 million budget gap that had to be filled. So we got there. It was difficult, but that was the process that we had to go through. Had some preliminary discussions with the board back in the March meeting, and the board approved a tentative budget that was submitted to the county superintendent, which is a legal requirement. And we did receive our approval from the county superintendent on April 17th, which allowed us to have our public hearing. Which is where we are today on May 7th. And we also have a recommendation to the board to have the final approval on our budget at this evening's meeting. Statutorily, the deadline for the board to approve their budget is May 14th. But we're hoping that you approve that tonight. Moving on to the next slide. These were the budget priorities that were established, and they're pretty consistent with what's been used in the past. These are in line with our goals and our mission, and also honoring those fixed costs that we have either through negotiated agreements or mandated programs. And we try to put together a budget that stays in line with these goals and these objectives that we have the best that we can. Quite honestly, it was quite a struggle this year as we look down at the last two items of those priorities. The agenda for tonight's meeting is to hopefully tell the story and give you a better sense of what's involved with our budget by highlighting our expenses and revenues, the projected school tax impact. We'll also provide some historical data so that you can see some of the trends that the district has been experiencing financially as well as with our enrollment. We're also going to talk about why we're in the situation where we're looking at a reduction in staffing for next year, and the things that we have to start thinking about beyond 1920 as we try to deal with some of the problems that we have financially. First of all, let's deal with our proposed expenses. So we have a pie chart here that lays out the expenses that we have, and these are in line with the State Department of Education program codes that they utilize. And as you can see, the largest expense that we have, which is very typical for school districts, are the regular programs at 26%. And we have our benefits, which is second in line at 16%. That is going to be a consistent item that I talk about through this budget process because the benefits are having a major impact on what we're dealing with this budget for the next year. Our support services are those services that you see listed there. I've consolidated them, but those are the services that we have in our schools that support the programs that go on in those buildings. Our special ed instruction is our in-district programs that we run. Operations, maintenance, security, those are the custodial maintenance operations, any of the services that we provide to our facilities. Charter school is another item that we'll talk quite a bit about, which is at 6.5% of our budget. That is also having an impact on our spending for next year. Debt service is up because of new debt, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. The administration comes next, and that deals with the school administration as well as the central office administration. Transportation deals with our mandated busing requirements that we have for students going to and from school, out of district for special education placements. Tuition is at 3% of our budget. The tuition will represent our out-of-district placements for special education students, as well as the students that are going to the county vocational schools. Special revenue are flow-through funds that come through the district. These are grants, and we'll talk a little bit about that down the road. And our basic skills bilingual instruction, that is the state terminology. We refer to it as AIS. That is coming in at 1.9%. Our co-curricular and after school, that represents our clubs and athletics, and rounding out the budget represents our capital outlay, which is a very small portion of our budget. And that is mostly for equipment needs. This lays out our expenses for the proposed year in comparison with the 18-19 school year, our current year, as of February 1st. That is the date that the state establishes for us to compare our budgets. So that doesn't necessarily represent where we will end up at the end of the year because there will be movement in the current year with budget transfers. But you can see there are a number of accounts listed up there that do have some reductions going forward next year, primarily due to staffing issues. And a couple of these items that I did want to point out to you, which is right here, this line, the general fund line. This is our operating budget. That's the day-to-day operations for our school district. The total increase in our budget for next year, you can see, is only 1.27%. That's our increase in spending over the current year. And you can see the increase in dollars is at $1,146,000. Interestingly, take a look at this line right above it, the benefits line, and where we are with our increase in that line. That line item actually is higher than our total budget, and that was the point that I had made earlier, how the benefits are really impacting our expenses for next year. And so that's a major issue for us. And the other item that I wanted to point out, some of the larger increases, regular instruction, that's our teacher salaries, mostly our instructional assistants that support the regular programs. So we do have a slight increase in that account, even though we do have some reductions in staffing. And the other major increase that I wanted to talk about was the tuition line. That continues to grow. That is our out-of-district tuition. You can see that's up by almost 9%. Those are to address needs for special ed students primarily. And then the last item I wanted to highlight for you is our debt service, which is down here. That's a totally different fund. That fund is used to pay off our principal and interest payment on previous bond referenda. That is going up substantially at 11.4%, and that is due to the fact that we have our first interest payment in next year's budget for the referendum that was just passed. On the revenue side, this is another pie chart for you to see, and we'll just go around clockwise here. And this represents our total budget. Local taxes from our general fund and our debt service fund are representing 83.64%. So that obviously is the largest piece of our pie, and that is the major revenue source for our budget. State aid is next at just over 6%. We did have a slight increase there. Tuition is coming in at 5.39%. That is primarily from the sending-receiving relationship that we have with Cranberry, although we do have a number of other students that do pay on a tuition basis. Now, the next one is this term called fund balance appropriation. This is another problem for us that we're going to spend some time on to tell this story. The fund balance appropriation, you can think of it as the district's reserves. And this is what is needed for cash flow and emergencies. Typically, the way fund balance appropriation is managed is you get yourself in a situation where when you finish your year, in many districts, you find yourself in a situation where you have excess surplus. That's the term that's used. And what excess surplus means is the state allows districts to keep up to 2% of their operating budget in fund balance. Anything above 2% is considered to be excess. So when you go through your year and your auditor does your financial statements at the end of the year, they will do a calculation to determine what your excess surplus is that would be appropriated in the subsequent budget year. So for example, in the 2017-18 school year, whatever excess surplus we generated out of that budget, we would be forced to appropriate it into the 19-20 budget, this budget. We didn't have any. So all of this surplus that is being appropriated into next year's budget is from surplus that is being generated out of the current year budget. And what's happening is your budgets are getting tighter because there had been a reliance on surplus to fund budgets. Your surplus is starting to come down, and as a result of that, you can't keep up with that appropriation. So you'll see in the next slide what I'm talking about, but this is an item you have to remember about, and this is, from a financial standpoint, this is a major concern that I have for the school district, that our reserves are at a very low rate, and we're becoming totally dependent on them to fund future budgets, and we're running out of money. Not saying that we're out of the 2%. We do have that. But if this continues, we're going to run into a situation where we dig into the 2%, and that will be extremely dangerous. The next area are our federal grants, which is flow-through money that's in our special revenue fund. And then we also have some miscellaneous revenue that's noted there, which is primarily for interest on investments, rental fees that we charge for groups to use our facilities. We also get some contributions from the community, and we also receive some money from the municipality for reimbursement for hazardous busing. Okay, here's a picture of our revenues, and what we've done is categorize this according to the way that the state lays these out. The local tax levy number in our general fund, for those that you don't know, there is a 2% cap on that number that says that you can't raise your local tax levy by more than 2% with a few exceptions. One of the exceptions deals with increases in the cost of health insurance premiums. And recall that I said that we've seen some increases in that area. So we were eligible to increase our local tax levy for an amount that allowed us to go up to 2.62%. That is the maximum. We can't go any higher by formula. So that is the highest we can go on the local tax levy. Our state aid information is up for next year, which is good news. Would like to see that going up higher. The unfortunate part about the state aid is that is a formula-driven number, and we are totally dependent upon the funds of the state budget. When you look at the formula that the state had generated based on Princeton funding, we are about $1 million short of where the state should be funding us if we were fully funded. So that's a problem for us, but every district's in the same boat that is not being fully funded. The next line, tuition. We do have a slight increase. One of the challenges that we're going to have there going forward is like I said, the large portion of that is for the Cranberry sending-receiving relationship, and they're starting to experience some declining enrollment. So as their enrollment declines, we could potentially see that revenue source going down as well. Now, the next line is the fund balance appropriation, which is what I was talking about on the previous slide. Now, you can see that that number is down by $768,000. That means we have $768,000 fewer resources to throw toward our budget for next year. And that is creating part of the problem that we had when we had that $1.2 million gap that I spoke about when we came in. We just did not have the surplus to keep up with the appropriation that we had in the current year. My fear is as these budgets get tighter and we're building the 2021 budget, we're going to have difficulty meeting that $2,350,000 number next year. At this time. So that is going to be a struggle for us. We're going to have to find ways to replenish that surplus. But that is a major problem for us in this budget for next year. Our miscellaneous revenue is down. We're very conservative with that. There's also some accounting issues that go on with that 18-19 number with bringing over reserves to balance our budget. So that's really an accounting thing. We're pretty much on par with our miscellaneous revenue for next year. So the total general fund, you can see, is up by the 1.27% that we talked about before. The federal grants and the state grants in our special revenue fund, these are what we call flow-through monies. These are monies that if you don't spend, you return to those governments. So what we're told to do is budget at 85% of our current year allocation. We don't know what that's going to be, but that's kind of the minimum guarantee that we'll get. So we expect that we will get more, but for budgeting purposes, we're told to budget at those levels. Moving down to our debt service fund, the local tax levy. This is the money that will be raised to pay off the principal and interest on our debt. As I mentioned before, we have the first year where we are implementing the costs for the referendum that was approved. We have an interest payment for next year, so our costs are up, and consequently, our local tax levy has gone up. In the past, with the 18-19 school year, we were able to give some tax relief in this area because there were some settlement funds that the district had that were utilized to help offset the local tax impact. Those funds are no longer there. So that's why you're seeing a big spike there, as well as the new debt. Some good news on the debt service side, though, is we do have a new state aid that has helped paying for that new debt. So we are going to get an additional $222,000 from the state to help pay off that debt. And the fund balance appropriation, this is what we expect to have in our debt service fund at the end of the year. Again, we will appropriate that rather than raising taxes. And we anticipate next year that we will be generating some interest income from the bond proceeds. And that's what that $225,000 is there. So again, bottom line, it's a 1.4% increase overall in our budget. On the tax side, now just a word about how school taxes and general taxes in the municipality are calculated. As you know, we are on what is called a fiscal year basis, which runs from July through June. The municipality runs on a calendar year basis, and they calculate their tax rates that way. So because they are on a different year than we are, what we have to do is we actually use 2 years of our budgets to figure out what the school tax rate is. So we're taking half of the levy that's raised in the current year and half of the levy that's being raised in the proposed year to determine how much local tax is needed for the calendar year of 19. So that's how you determine the amount of levy. Now, the assessed valuation will get divided into that levy amount. Now, the assessed valuation you'll see is just under $7.2 billion and is only up less than 1% at $46 million. Like to see a little bit more growth in that assessed valuation to help with the tax rate, but those are the numbers that are coming from the municipality. So when you do the calculation of the taxes that are required by the assessed valuation, it comes out to a school tax rate for 2019 at 1.151 per $100, which is a 3.2 cent increase on $100 of assessed value, or a 2.82% increase in the rate. Average house in Princeton is at $838,562 assessed value, and for that home, that's at the average. We're looking at an increase of $264 on the average assessed home. Some historical data we'd like to share to help tell the story on our expenses. We're looking at some of the major categories here. First being salaries. We are a labor-intensive business here. About 77% of our costs are related to personnel in salaries and benefits. So that is a major line item for us. So you see those first two areas, the salaries and benefits. You can see historically that we've had some pretty healthy increases in our salaries, and then in 1920 we've got a actual reduction next year because of the reduction of 3% of our staff. But overall, during that period of time, we're looking at an average of 3.5%. On the benefits side, we had some consistent increases in our benefits line. You can see we're right around 4.5% for that 3-year period before this year. And then we got hit with a pretty substantial increase. Our health insurance premiums are based upon claims experience. And if we have a favorable year, you could expect to see some lower numbers like we have in the past. Unfortunately, we've had some bad experience, which has driven up the renewal premiums for next year, and that's why we're seeing those increases. We are trying to promote some different options for employees, which would be in their best interest as far as what their contributions would be toward those programs, as well as save premium dollars for the district. We are going through that open enrollment period now with our employees, so hopefully we'll be able to address some of that issue through that process. The next item is our charter school. Now, here you can see some large jumps in the charter school and the impact that it had. Back in the 17-18 school year, you can see that expense jumping up quite a bit, and that's when the charter school actually expanded. Now, keep that in mind when we're looking at the 17-18 school year. And then 18-19, again, we saw a pretty substantial increase. Now, there's an asterisk there that it's important to note. That number in the charter school for 18-19, right here, that's an actual number. It's not a budgetary number. We know what that number is because it's based upon our October 15 count. So that is a final number, so I put the actual in there. And you can see, comparing that actual number to what is our projected number for next year of $6.5 million, that is a number that the State Department of Education tells us we must budget for. We don't have a choice. It's all formula-driven based upon projected enrollment that the Department of Ed indicates will be at the charter school. So we are forced to put that number in our budget, which represents a $372,000 increase in our budget. And keep in mind, our total budget's only going up 1.27%, so that's a big chunk of that increase that we're seeing in the budget. And our general fund, you can see historically, we had some nice increases recently, but you can see the big drop for 1920. For all of the reasons that I've stated, that's why we're down there. On the revenue side, I want to jump down because I just mentioned this to you, the big jump in the charter school. And look at this line here in the fund balance appropriation, how much we had to throw from our surplus. I think that's where the problem started. Because of that big jump in the charter school expense, the only way that we could have funded that was to hit our surplus hard. And you can see since that point, what's been happening with our surplus. You can see it starting to decline. And that's what I'm getting alarmed with because our budgets are getting tighter. We just don't have the resources anymore to contribute, and that is going to be a problem for us going forward. Now, jumping up to the top again, the local tax levy on the general side, you can remember I said we had a 2% cap on the local tax levy, but yet our numbers are over 2%. Well, we talked about this year for 1920, we had a health insurance adjustment that we're allowed to take. In the previous years, we were also eligible for the health insurance adjustment, but we also were entitled to an adjustment for enrollment growth. Again, there is a state calculation that goes into play. If enrollment is going over a certain rate, the state will allow you to increase your local tax levy for that reason. So the increases that you're seeing in those years were adjusted to our enrollment growth. But for 1920, we were not eligible for that enrollment growth. Important to note that. On the state aid side, pretty consistent. You can see historically, if you go back to 15-16, we were at 4.7. We're right around the same area this year, although I expect that number will go up somewhat once we do our extraordinary aid application that our Director of Special Services is working on. So I expect that that deficit that we're seeing, once we know that number, will actually go away. But it's been pretty consistent, no major increases there. It's fair to say that that's been relatively flat. Same thing with our tuition. Again, that's the cranberry line for the most part. Again, we are seeing some declining enrollment going over there. So this is an area that we'll also have to watch for the future. We've already talked about the fund balance and the issue there. Again, that is an important point to keep in mind as we're talking about this budget. And then the final line is our debt service. Just wanted to illustrate historically where our debt has been. You can see that it was not so bad leading up to the 1920 school year, but again, because of the implementation of the referendum with our first payment in the 1920 school year, that's why you see that increase. Here's a picture of our enrollment. Over the 5-year period, you're seeing some pretty consistent growth with a big spike going up to 16, 17. But on average, we're seeing about a 2% growth, and we're not really seeing the support in other sources of revenue for that we would like. And these are the numbers that we've seen for enrollment increases over that same period of time. So over a 5-year period, we've had an increase of 273 students using our projection from our demographer for next year.
Can I just make the point
Yep.
here? So in the as we look at these numbers, you look at 2017-18, the 0.73% growth, we have to keep in mind that that was the first year of the charter school expansion, so there were actually 54 students that are not counted in these numbers that went to the charter school that year. That'd be, if they were with us, that'd be 1.4% increase on a district of 3,800. So that number would effectively be over 2%. And then the following year, there were another 22 students, so that'd be another 0.5, 0.6%. So that number would be closer to 1.5, 1.6, as opposed to what you see there. Just to keep in mind as we're thinking about enrollments and looking at our demographic projections, that we have to consider that in the trend as well.
Okay, here's the painful part. We've discussed when we started having discussions with the board, we had about a $2 million gap between our projected expenses and the revenue sources that we had. And it was very painful to get this balance to budget. Now, in order to cut roughly $2 million out of your budget, keep in mind that 77% of our budget is in personnel. So most of the money is there. So these were very painful reductions that had to be made. There was a lot of discussion that went on. And what we have here is that we've categorized these staff reductions so that we can lay them out for you to see what they are. Roughly 10 teaching positions that are being eliminated, some through attrition. We're also eliminating 10 instructional assistants, 2 at each building, K to 8. We also have some stipends or extra periods that are at the middle school or high school. These are extra compensation that teachers get beyond their normal contracted pay. So, for example, a teacher may be teaching an extra period beyond their contract. So these were, rather than cutting positions, we were looking to cut those extra periods. And you can see what those are. We also have a stipend for the athletic trainer for the same reason. So the athletic trainer is going to have to work within the normal time frame. And instructional assistant stipends in our contract, they get a stipend for personal care, so we've eliminated 10 of those because we feel that we'll be able to address the management of the instructional assistants a little differently next year. And the superintendent has also given up on a merit goal option for next year. We also have some other staff reductions including the administration, which you can see there. The parent education outreach coordinator and the human resource staff member and the high school secretary were all attrition. So no one really lost their job in those 3 areas. So those are the staff reductions, again, representing about 3% of the district's staff.
Make some comments here. I don't know if the board has questions on this slide. I do want to reiterate what Tom said, that these were very difficult decisions to have to make in looking at, with 77% of our budget being tied to our people. As Tom said, we're a human organization. We eventually couldn't make all of our cuts in non-salary areas, so we did have to look at staff. We looked initially at the high school, where we did see a decline in enrollment from last year to this year. We dropped about 50 students. So as we looked carefully at our master schedule and the sections that we had and the enrollments that we had, we did see that there were some ways that we could take smaller sections of a particular course and consolidate them into a larger section, and so we were able to, through that process, to reduce 1 FTE in each of the major core areas: English, social studies, science, and math. We also looked at the AIS program at the elementary school, where we have 3 teachers currently. This was another very hard decision to make. We value the support that those teachers provide for our students. but we also felt that we could provide that support with two, and the support of the classroom teachers. So we've looked at all of these. I would point out with some of the other changes, for example, the Parent Education Outreach Coordinator. We're budgeting a 0.6 for that position, and this is a wonderful example of how we're trying to solve some of our fiscal constraints in some creative ways, and relying on our partners. We're actually looking to a partner in town to share services for someone that we feel is going to be a benefit to our school and our students. So that position is not being eliminated. We're going to be sharing services for that position. But I'm open if the board has questions on this particular slide. I'm happy to answer them.
We can come back to it.
Or we can come back to it.
Yeah. Okay. Next slide. And some of these items we've talked about already, but these are really the drivers that are leading toward that reduction in staffing of 3%. We talked about the state aid issue being about $1 million short of being fully funded. Now, when you look at the state data on how they did their calculations, they also give you statewide information. And the interesting thing to note there is that if the state fully funded the formula across the state, they would need an additional $2.17 billion. So the fact that we're $1 million short in the scheme of things, that gives you a picture of why we're $1 million short. So, my fear is that even the governor has talked about wanting to fully fund education at some point during his term. When you're $2.17 billion short of the number, and they have as many budget problems as many of the school districts are having, I don't think it's realistic to expect they're going to fully fund education in the near future. Another driver is the tuition paid to the charter school, which we've already talked about, being up about 6%, or $372,000. Obviously, the cost of funding our negotiated agreement, again, we're in a personnel business. As I said, 77% of our budget in salaries and benefits, so that obviously is a driver of costs that are in our budget. We have to honor those negotiated agreements, so that certainly adds impact to the budget. And of course, I've spent quite a bit of time telling you about the situation that's happening with our reserves, where we have $768,000 less available to go toward the budget. If we were able to match our fund balance appropriation from the prior year, we'd be able to reinstate $768,000 worth of program cuts or staff cuts that we've made, but we just don't have that as a resource. Now, beyond 1920, we need to start thinking about how to address some of the issues that I've already talked about. The fact that we have less reserves expected. We've got to start finding ways to build those reserves back up. The declining enrollment from Cranberry is going to impact our tuition revenue line, so that is also a potential resource that could be going down. The uncertainty of state aid, who knows what will happen with that. The good news is we've started to see some growth in those areas, and we could hope that that continues to help with the growth that we have in the district. But we can't count on it. So with our continued enrollment growth, and nothing beyond a 2% local tax levy for growth like we're experiencing for the proposed year, that will be difficult for us to deal with. So we have to start looking at other ways of doing business in order to maintain the programs. And this is by no means an all-inclusive list, but just some ideas for us to start thinking about as we start to develop the 2021 budget. We have to start identifying additional efficiencies and savings. We've talked about certain things like doing ESIPs, the Energy Savings Improvement Programs, those kinds of things. Those are things that we really need to start taking seriously, and we need to start implementing. So I will look forward to working with the new Director of Plant and Operations on getting that off the ground so that we can start seeing some savings there. But those kinds of things we have to do. I think we also have to look at the way we just run our business. If there's better ways of doing it, and that means restructuring certain functions where we can save money, these are things that we really have to consider. We may not like the consequences, but I think we have to consider them. We also have to look at our staffing levels. Obviously, personnel is a major cost. Things that I'm talking about here, we have to look at our class size. Can we afford to continue to provide the program at the class sizes that we have, keeping in mind what's coming down the road with the resources that we have available? I know this is something that the board has talked about, is trying to get some legislative assistance to try to fully fund state aid or to help districts like Princeton that has a charter school that really does hurt our ability to maintain our programs in the district. So working with our legislators to try to get some additional support for that. We also have to look at our collective bargaining agreements that we have with our employees. Those agreements are going to expire at the end of the 1920 school year. So we have to look for efficiencies in those agreements. And finally, developing additional partnerships in the community that can help support our budget, and also looking at other sources of revenue. That can be extremely painful, some of the choices that are out there. But when you're trying to balance a budget, you have to consider those kinds of things. As I said, not an all-inclusive list, just some ideas to throw out on the table for us to start thinking about as we get into the 2021 budget development process. And that concludes the report on the 1920 budget. And at this point, if we're not going to, I don't know if Beth, if we're going to go for questions from the board, but we do have to have the official opportunity for the public to ask questions or to give comments.
Thank you, Tom. I think we would start then with questions from the board.
So I would ask a question. When I think of special ed, I think the 8 million special ed instruction plus the almost 4 million child study team. So together it's about $12 million. Do you have a figure of what the sending district pays in special ed reimbursement?
The agreement that exists with Cranberry is that they pay a fixed dollar for the high school students for the regular instruction program. And in addition to that, a fee of $80,000 was established for resource center services that would be provided by the district. The Cranberry District does not have what's referred to as any special ed students that are in self-contained programs, because if they were in those types of programs, there would be a separate tuition rate for that program. But the Resource Center does not have, in the state calculation of tuition rates, does not have a rate that gets calculated. So it's really done on a district-by-district basis. It can be done through the way that we're doing it on a fixed amount, or in many cases what happens is districts will bill the districts on a monthly basis based upon actual usage. But the practice in this district has been, as I said, it was a fixed amount.
A flat fee of
80,
$80,000?
yeah. Now, the other thing that I'll add to that, because there has been some discussion between the Cranberry and Princeton administration about that number, because they have a relatively new business administrator in Cranberry. How long has she been there, Evelyn? A couple years, maybe?
A while.
So, she raised a question, and rightfully so, one of the first few days I was here, about whether or not that's the right number. And what I committed to do was to look at our actual expenses once the year is over and go back to try to determine what those actual costs were for the Cranberry students, and then that will give us a better idea of what that number actually is. It may be at the 80, but it may not be. But if it's not, then we're going to adjust that going forward, starting with the 2021 year.
In the recent SRA, the send receive agreement that we signed, there was language in there that that we both sides agreed to, that we would sort of itemize the special ed costs for our Cranberry students and share those, and so that was going to be the way moving forward. It wasn't going to be a fixed amount. It was going to be more itemized.
And Tom, do you expect that year over year, that will be something you come back to with the Cranberry Business Administrator to look at moving forward?
Well, there's, what did you say? There actually isn't, there's an itemization in the...
Yep, it's the
Yeah.
that's the way the agreement was written.
Yeah,
so
so-
we're just going to be taking a look at each student and figuring out the shared,
Yeah.
the cost, and then applying that.
Not an easy thing to do.
No, it's a lot of work.
And that's going to put pressure on Mickey's office as well as the business office. She'll provide the details. The business office will have to cost it out. That was not put into the agreement for next year. I mean, that was agreed to before I got here between the BAs. But we can certainly do that actual costing out for this year when we close it to see where that number actually lies. And then have that discussion during the 2021 contract period to say, that $80,000 number that we were talking about either is the right number or we need to talk about a different number.
I mean, it just seemed very low to me, given the Cranberry kids are our kids in the schools, and so we don't differentiate between these wonderful kids. And so it seems that it's challenging to track to get good cost numbers on that. So I just see the number of kids and the $80,000 reimbursement relative to the total budget that we have, and it's just hard to imagine that it covers our costs.
You may be right. And once we close out the year, I'll have an answer for that.
Tom,
to see
I'm
our
not
actual
sure
expenses.
you may be right as a fair answer. I know that we've been working with Mickey, and I know that the Cranberry BOE has looked at past information. So saying he may be right, I don't think that's a fair assessment, because we've looked at past, and what the board needs to understand is that when we went into this agreement, we said that what we would do is that we would give it time and we would let Mickey look at the usage, and then Cranberry would go back and we would look at the end year, and that we're very happy to pay for the needs of our students. And I told you that. We're very happy to do that. We want to make sure that, that Princeton is paid for the services that they provide our students. We've never backed down from that, but we have to start with something. So 80,000 seemed to be a number that Mickey was happy with and that RBA was happy with, and then we'll look at it at the end. But it does take a tremendous amount of painstaking work by the department to determine, did this child stop in once a week or did they stop in 3 times a week? And now we're getting into very, very serious confidentiality areas, and I'm not very comfortable with that. But Cranberry is very, very, I will give this board in all confidence, we had this conversation at our Cranberry meeting a couple of weeks, was it just a week ago? And our board was given every confidence that we want to make sure that we make Princeton whole on this, and that, we pay what that.
And that's been my understanding with Dr. Janko and
That's
the business
our
administrator
understanding
from
as
the
well.
very start. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, Evelyn. Is there anyone else? Debbie, you have a question?
Yes, I will be voting no on the 2019-2020 budget. We need to examine our entire budget in detail. If we don't start tomorrow, we'll be in the exact same place next March, laying employees off to balance the budget. Last year, those of us on the Finance Committee talked extensively about cost-saving ideas that would not affect students. We focused on healthcare and dug into health savings accounts. These accounts are a cost savings for the district and for many employees and will not affect any student programs. Additionally, at the June 12, 2018 regular board meeting, the board approved the send-receive agreement with Cranberry. However, we did not finalize the cost owed Princeton for special education expenses for Cranberry students. For the past few years, Cranberry has only paid $80,000 a year, down from $180,000 it had been paying. At the March 19th, 2019 board meeting, I questioned the travel budget. The next day, I received travel actuals from the past 2 years, which confirmed that we were over budgeted the 2019-2020 amount by $25,000. I suggested we move $25,000 out of the travel budget to reduce our overall budget, or another thought I had was we could use that for a part-time AIS teacher. We have the start of a good working relationship with Princeton Charter School. I would like to meet more regularly with them, with people at the table who are focused on cost savings with shared service. I want to look at the economies of scale with charter, including technology, curriculum supplies, especially textbooks, facility supplies, athletic supplies, office supplies, and maybe even combining both 8th grade classes in a fall trip to DC. The board, administration, and staff need to work together to share any cost-saving ideas. We need to start working with the Department of Ed and other districts to understand how districts are supposed to continually support unfunded mandates year after year. This year, the science requirements changed, requiring us to purchase new science books. My goal going forward is to create an ad hoc cost savings group and immediately start reviewing our expenses by departments. I want to streamline services while continuing to support our strategic goals, including wellness and equity that make Princeton Public Schools a great place to learn. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Anyone else have questions? Brian? No? I have a question. Could you go back to the issue of enrollment? Because I think it's important for the public to understand and all the board members to understand as we have a committee, we have a future enrollment committee that we've gathered with members of the community and board representation, and we're trying to go back to our demographic report and make sure we've got the numbers right and make sure we all agree on the assumptions. We brought in people from last year who had problems with the demographer, and we've asked them to help us with the math, because basically we as a board need to have those numbers right so that we can do future planning. But one of the things we know is that the line is going up, as we saw on that slide. And I think that what is important for everyone to understand is how that works with our revenue. And so we have as the town grows and as the rateable base grows, which means as we get new building, that causes our tax base to go up. That has no relationship to our ability to tax. We have a 2% cap on our ability to raise the levy from year to year. So there could be a large growth in the rateable base. We could have a lot of development, but the schools wouldn't necessarily get any additional tax money. In fact, there's no connection, right? You'd have more people paying the same tax amount. Basically, there's more dollars to share the tax burden, but the dollars going to the schools stay the same effectively. Correct me if I'm wrong. I just wanted to kind of review this again so that we are clear.
Yes and no.
Yes, thank you.
Keep in mind on the local tax levy, there is some adjustment that is made for certain enrollment growth above 1% projected. And the higher that rate is, the higher the adjustment is. So, some of those increases that you've seen historically going over the 2%, it was because there were higher projected enrollment growth by the Department of Ed.
Right.
But any of that additional tax money that comes in through people moving into the town, no, we don't get a piece of that, if that's your question.
Yeah, and I just want to understand, there are waivers for enrollment, but they do not happen on a regular basis.
They're not waivers.
They're not waivers.
They're not waivers. They're adjustments.
Adjustments to enable us to tax more.
Yeah. Yes.
But they haven't necessarily matched the rate of growth because they don't happen in a year. For example, this year where we're at 0.75 or something like that.
Right.
We can continue to go up, but we don't increase. And so in the year you don't increase, you keep the same base. And so you kind of miss that piece effectively.
Well, keep in mind that the adjustment that you get is based upon a projection by the Department of Ed. Mm-hmm. And they're looking at our historical data to make that projection.
Okay, thank you. Brian?
Can I, and I just, for a little bit of clarification, just a real-life example. So let's say you knock down a 2-bedroom house and you build a 4-bedroom house on that same lot. And the four-bedroom house implies that you're going to have 4 people sleeping in those rooms, and some of them will probably be small, and some of them will probably come to our schools. The land will be taxed at the same rate, because if it's a 1/4 acre, 3/4 of an acre, that land does not change. But the structure, the assessed value of the structure, versus the 2-bedroom house that it replaced, is a higher value, more square footage. Does that have an impact on the amount of taxes or tax revenue that can come into the district?
No. The only help that things like that do is it increases the assessed valuation in the town. So theoretically, that helps control the rate. So the higher the assessed values go up, you're able to manage the rate because it's spread out over more dollars.
No more money to the school district, though.
I want to make sure everyone's really clear on that, because that's important.
So I think another way to think about it is that they're totally disconnected. But there can be some correlation when ratables grow. If what's driving the growth of ratables are new developments that have school children, then in some years we may qualify for the adjustment. So we may be able to be given permission to tax more. But if there was no change in ratables and we had significant growth in school children, we have to address that. If there's significant growth in ratables and no growth in school children, these things don't connect. They occasionally correlate, but they're two different equations.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question? Bill?
So this afternoon, I got tired of working on my patent stuff. So I looked at this budget that Tom put together, and I did a little math. And if you look on page 13 and page 14, you'll see the salaries and the benefits, and you'll see the percentages that they went up over the last, average of 5 years. And so I did a bit of math. And if salaries and benefits keep increasing at the constant rate that they've been doing for 5 years, and our taxes only increase at 2%, the taxable part, we will have a budget gap next year of only for salaries and benefits of between $812,000 and $1.3 million. The difference being 2.6% increase in salary, which hasn't been achieved, or the actual 3.53%. So probably next year, 812 to 1.3 million that Tom or his replacement will have done. So to me, I feel like we're in a crisis, and we need to realize that we need to do something about it. When I was an engineer making heart catheters, we had to figure out a way to get them from like $13 down to $11. These are the things that go into your coronary arteries. Otherwise, the plant was going to Mexico. We figured out how to reduce costs. We worked at it. We should be in a crisis mode now of how do we do that? And I look back over my little notebook that I carry around, and I keep seeing, time to roll your eyes, the same bullet point cost savings since months and months and months. And I'd love to see people sweating, saying, let's save some money. And I know it's not easy. I know it's hard. We have contracts. We have, it's complicated, but it's not breaking the laws of physics. It's just rewriting contracts. It's sitting down and talking. It's thinking outside the box. It's all those sort of cliches, but it actually works. I experienced it as an engineer. You can actually do it, and it keep jobs. So feel like we're in a crisis, and let's do something about it.
Thank you, Bill.
Feel the crisis.
Greg?
This is actually more of a comment than a question, but Tom, thank you very much for your presentation. I think it's really helpful and it was very helpful to have a number of years of data to actually sort of take a look at some of the structural issues. And, I want to thank my fellow board members for focusing on some of the structural issues. The one thing I want to add is I very much like the comment that we have to be as creative as possible, and that creativity means thinking outside the box, but also working not just here but with our fellow districts, because these are structural issues that many districts right now are facing. And part of the thing that I think we need to do is identify and use ourselves as a case study for the type of issues that districts and public education is facing, and then be able to reach out to other allies, and other districts are doing this already. There's an opportunity here, as our superintendent said, as well as a lot of pain. And this is a community that has always valued public education. And so I think we do need to roll up our sleeves and look at every sort of option available and reach out to as many partners as possible to help overcome these structural issues.
Ms. Ponder?
Thank you, Tom. That was really an excellent presentation. I think I understand it better than I ever have, and I appreciate that. You know, and Steve, I appreciate you characterizing this as the budget tells a story, because I think the numbers do tell a story, and I think how we've responded to these challenges also tells a story. I voted against the budget the last time we voted on it, and I did because I believed that the budget was balanced to the detriment of the most vulnerable people in our schools. People of color, staff, and teachers. Immigrants and people who need special help. We got rid of a couple of AIS positions. Special ed, people who support them and assist those kids. But what I don't see is pain in advanced placement or in the orchestra or in those areas that we like to hold up and bandy about as representing what a fine school district we are. Any school district that does not take care of the least of us is not a fine school district. And so my concern is, in terms of where I am this evening, is that what we've done, and again, I don't envy you because I think you had to make some really hard decisions, but I think if a budget tells a story, the story is contrary to our strategic goal of equity and fairness. So here I am, understanding the hard job and the difficult decisions and some of the pain that's been experienced, understanding that a whole bunch of people aren't going to feel any pain. And to vote against this budget would be closing the barn door after the horse is gone, because all the people who are losing their jobs have already been advised accordingly. So I'm struggling with, do we stand on principle, or do we say as a statement that the pain needs to be equally felt, and not just for those who don't have someone to come to this meeting and sit in the audience or call us or write us emails or speak up. So that's kind of where I am. I don't know where I'm going to come down, but I know that it doesn't feel like this budget or the steps that we've taken to get to this point are consistent with our stated goals and priorities.
Can I respond?
Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah. Michelle, you and I hold the same value in terms of a focus on equity and a focus on our most vulnerable, and that's how we are judged. I see the story differently because I believe that we are still moving forward with our commitment to equity. And we're doing it not by ourselves, we're doing it in partnership. So we look back, we have to look at the history here. Last year we created a new position at the high school to support some of our most vulnerable students. That position is still in the budget. Then we had an opportunity to partner with the Y, with the Bonner Foundation, with Corner House, and we got a 5-year, $300,000 grant to provide another position, a full-time person working in our schools, our middle school and our high school, to to work with our most vulnerable, truly most vulnerable students. So we've already increased now by 2 in the past 2 years the number of people who are working with our most vulnerable. The position at the middle school is one that I value so much, and I believe it needs to be a full-time position. But I also had an opportunity to partner with an organization in town to share the services of a really wonderful person who I think is going to do a great job of supporting our families and our students in that role. 3 days a week, not 5 days a week. But I want to get that back up to full time. But if I look at the history of the last couple of years, we actually have increased the number of people who are supporting our most vulnerable students, and we will continue to do that. But it's not something that we can do by ourselves. I think I like what you said, Debbie, about we need to be partnering with the charter school, and we are, to look at sharing services and making cost cutting. And they've come to us and said, we can help you save money on transportation. And we will go with you to the state to advocate for changes. We've partnered with our associations who are represented here tonight, who have been really wonderful about saying, yeah, we see the bigger issue here and we're willing to work with you. So I think that, I think we're focused on the same value. I see the story differently. I see us as saying we want to support our most vulnerable, and we're going to join together and do that. And I think that the budget presented here, it's not my ideal, but I think it's one that's fair and that's been thought through really carefully. I wish we had the opportunity to hold on to 3 IAS teachers at each school. But I also can look at the numbers of students who are being served and see that we can still we have great teachers and they can do that work. And maybe it's not 5 days a week, maybe it's 4. And maybe it's not 1 or 2 students in the class that they're working with, maybe it's 4 or 5. But we can still meet that need. There are tough choices that we had to make, and I ultimately bear the responsibility for those decisions. But I think that I brought to the table my values that are focused on equity. You and I may disagree about how that's represented, but I want to make sure that this board hears and this community hears that we are continually focused on our most vulnerable students and all our students.
Can I say something?
Please, yeah.
I'd like to bring us back to the bigger picture and our role as a board. And I think that, and I appreciate, thank you, Michelle, for your comments, which are so important. And I think I want to get back to what Debbie said and what Bill said and what Dan said. I think I'm excited to hear the voices on this board, because I think I joined the board last year and we were so overwhelmed by the need for a referendum and the concern about the growth and what we were going to do. And we spent the whole year battling back and forth amongst ourselves and the community and absorbing a lot of energy and passion. And we did not have a lot of time last year to focus on our mission, our goal of student achievement and how are we meeting, what the students need. And I think in January, we had an opportunity to kind of reboot and reset. And unfortunately, that cycle doesn't match the budget cycle, right? We got dropped in the middle of a budget cycle, and it's nobody's fault, and everybody was doing their best, and has been doing their best on this board for years in the past. I know everyone has the best intentions, but the circumstances of the past year have been very difficult for us to be good governance, good governing boards, to be good boardsmen. And I would say that we have an opportunity now, at this point. We've got a budget halfway through. We've got Tom, thank you so much for jumping into this and doing this in a couple months, but this problem has been building for years, right? And so now we've got what we've got. We have started a healthy cycle this year. We are going to have a board retreat in July or August. We're fixing the date. And that is the time when all of these ideas are going to come to the table. We're going to talk about equity. We're going to talk about the gap. And we're going to have to come up with goals as a board to guide our very competent administrators and say, here's what you need to do. And we don't tell them to go and where they're going to put their file documents or who's going to move to what room, or we're not going to look at the small pieces. We're going to say, we see a gap of $2 million, and how are you going to address that? And it's time for us to think, how are we rethinking the product that we are delivering to the students? We have to be very creative. I mean, all of these ideas and more are going to be needed. We're going to need ideas from the community, from the staff, from everyone, because in Princeton, we've been delivering this premium education to our students, and we have wonderful people doing it, and we all mean well, but it costs a lot of money, and we can't continue to do it this way. We just can't afford it. And we have to rethink, and we have to restructure, we have to reprioritize, we have to think about the future, and what do our kids need for the future, not for our past. It takes a lot of creativity. So I think this board is up to it, and I think we have a lot of work in front of us, but I look forward to being able to start talking about this in July. I look forward to talking in October, which I think traditionally this board has not done. We've often received the budget information in January and just says, here, deal with it, here's the numbers. We, in October, are going to have some questions about the budget parameters to make sure they meet our goals and objectives, and they're meeting equity, and they're meeting the student wellness, and they're meeting the academic achievement. And we're going to have to make this magic happen together. But I think this board's going to be very involved in that process, and I look forward to being part of it. So thank you all, because I really think we have a lot of work.
Can I just say something? I would also remind everyone, we work in committees, and we work in committees quite well. And for years, these committees have thought through these questions. So we may not see the budget until January, but every time we approve a new position in personnel, we say, how does this affect kids? Every time we think about a new program in student achievement, we say, okay, does this meet the needs of all students, from the students who have the most to the students who need us the most? And so we may change our processes and how we talk about this, but this is not the first time we are talking about it. I would say a few of us, going back to getting ideas for cost savings, it may be as simple as creating, and this is not simple work, but a few of us talked last week, if we have an email address where we can elicit examples of suggestions from very small cost savings ideas on the part of parents and students and teachers to larger, more programmatic changes, we need all the help that we can get. But we have been working on this, and our administrators and our teachers every day have been. So I look forward to continuing that work.
Thank you, Betsy.
So one thing I want to say is we should be able to do more than one thing. There's a lot of us. So the fact that I disagree with you that last year the referendum was all we ever did. We did a lot in finance, we did a lot in student achievement, we did a lot in personnel. So I disagree with that statement. I'm afraid July, October is too late. I really, really do, because it takes a very long time to move the boulder in the public school process. I mean, we had 6 months of meetings before we really HSA, now we know what to do. Our enrollment period is now. So I really do. I think July is going to be too late. October is going to be way too late, and we're not going to be able to answer this. And it isn't just, positions. It's more into the detail. It really is the detail. It's like looking at activity-based costing. How much does it cost to do these activities? And is that too much for that? And should we be looking at a different way to do it? I also feel some of our little extra committees have the same people on them, so they don't have the time to do a lot of stuff. I honestly, if we wait till July, it's going to be too late, because nobody does much in the summer. I think we need to start literally tomorrow. I really do. And I'm nervous about us just saying, oh yeah, last year was a referendum, I think we're going to get lost, and I think we need to work on it a lot more than what we are.
I just want to add, Beth, I really appreciate that you've been moving us in the direction of thinking really carefully about our role and thinking big picture, because I do think as a board that is our responsibility to keep the big picture and the vision of the district in our minds. And I think actually to add to a little bit to what Betsy said about working in committee, one of the things I'm most excited about that I think our board is making a lot of progress on is recognizing the way that our committees can work together. An example would be thinking really carefully about the way our equity committee and our student achievement committee can look at the offerings that we are reviewing for the district, and thinking carefully about the way those two the way achievement and equity get carried out. And so I think that that's where we want to be as a board, I think, is holding these big strategic priorities in our heads and making decisions. I don't make any assumptions about which classes carry forward. I think that we allow our educators to do that based on the values that we hold as a district. And so I think that we have the potential not to pit any one student against another, and to think really, really creatively about how equity and achievement can serve one another.
Thank you, Jess. And Betsy, I'll just say that I didn't mean to suggest at all that we didn't do other work last year. My goodness, people were working day and night on so many things. I just think we were overwhelmed by not only our regular work, but the work of those 6 or 7 hour meetings that we had almost every 2 weeks. So I do thank you so much for your work in student achievement, and the members of the past boards. I certainly respect and value all the work that's been done. So, and Debbie, as you know, we are working every day. There's no time where we're just going to sit around and wait till July. I mean, we're all trying to do what we can do, and our committees are working hard. So thank you.
But we don't have a cost savings like group.
Yeah, but we
That's
also,
where
yeah.
I'm coming from. I'm just coming
Yeah,
from
I
the
appreciate
budget.
that. I think we have to be, as Jess said, we have to be very mindful of our role as, we are a board of education, and it's not our role to be telling our educators what to do. We have to make sure it's done well, but we do have to lead and to govern and have expectations from them. And I think that that's our job, and I think we'll be able to do that well with this group of people. Thank you.
And just wanted to also add that the summer is a very good time for all of us working together to think through what our strategic goals are for the following year. And so that gives us a platform and allows each of our committees to work more closely with each other and to be, all of us to understand what the goals are for the following year. So I'm actually very excited about the summer. I'm excited for the opportunity for all of us to be working together, because these are large structural issues. Tom, thanks again. And but the budget is just part of it, right? Our goal here is student achievement, is making sure that we create as warm and welcoming an environment as possible. And so that is our opportunity as a board to set these goals along with our superintendent, and then to work with the superintendent and his team to map out over the next year how we achieve that in all sorts of facets. And I think that's a great opportunity for us, and I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you, Greg. If there's no more board comments, I think we can go to public questions from the public. We welcome you to come forward. We do ask that people keep their comments to 3 minutes to make sure everyone has time to speak. And please state your name and your address. Hi, Daphne.
Hi, let me just get my notes.
Isn't there a sign-up sheet? Yeah. No, I don't. Should I go get it?
I'll wait.
Okay, great, thanks. I guess we're looking for the list, but if you want to just go, why don't you?
I'll wait till Steve comes.
Okay, great.
Thank you. So, I don't want to cut the line, so.
Oh, well, which one is it? This is the first one? The
Well, I'm
agenda.
here, I'll start.
Okay.
Okay. So, good evening. My name is Daphne Kendall. I have 2 children who attend Princeton Public Schools. I'm here tonight as a parent, a Princeton taxpayer, and former board member. My number one priority has always been our school community, especially students whom are most vulnerable. A budget reflects the board's values. Which programs are funded and which are eliminated reflect the true priorities of the board. Like many others here tonight, I'm disappointed by the choices you have made in this budget. For those of you who are voting to approve the budget, you'll be taking services away for the most vulnerable students, our special ed students, English language learners, low income, and minority students, which is contrary to the claimed focus on equity. Yes, money is tight, but you have all known since October that there was a large gap that needed to be closed. You could have negotiated an extension to the PREA and PRESA contracts, gotten some savings on health care, and increased tuition payments, but you didn't. You could have fulfilled your fiduciary duty and ensured that the Cranberry Board of Education pays fully for the special education services provided, as was discussed last year when the send-receive agreement was renewed, and it was discovered that the Cranberry Board of Education paid just $80,000 for special education for 46 students, down from $180,000 just a few years prior. But you didn't. Now teachers and services for the most vulnerable of students will be reduced. A budget is a reflection of a board's priorities. Finally, $200,000 of expenses for mold remediation is a stated reason for the tight budget. This is one of the reasons it was critical to install air conditioning in all schools this summer, as the window units were cited as one of the reasons for the mold. The decision to only air condition one school won't alleviate this issue in all schools, CP in particular, and will likely result in mold remediation expenses this fall as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Daphne. If we can go to the list now, Joanna Ware, I think is the first. Pardon me if it's Mayor. I'm sorry, I can't read it.
No, it's Vier.
Sphere?
Vier.
Vier. Oh, thank you.
My name is Joanna Vier, and I live on Deer Path. I have 2 children at Littlebrook. My oldest is in Eva Genova's 2nd grade class, and I'm here with, I think, 5 other parents from Miss Genova's class, along with others from Littlebrook. My primary concern is the effect cutting teaching positions will have on class size. I watch these meetings, and I hear a lot about how equity is a priority, yet in the same breath I hear that we have to accept larger classes. I think there's a disconnect there. Class size is an equity issue, particularly at the elementary school level. Littlebrook's enrollment already exceeds capacity and is rising. This point was hammered home when the district sought parental support for the facilities referendum. Littlebrook has a capacity of 341 students, according to the district's website. We have 380 students enrolled as of last week. The special education PTO said at the last board meeting that 1 in 5 students in the district has an IEP or a 504 plan. When there are 20 to 30 students in a class, each student gets a smaller fraction of the teacher's attention, and differentiation becomes that much more difficult. As student frustrations rise, so do the number of disciplinary problems. Despite the teacher's best efforts, some children will be left behind, and the most vulnerable students will be disproportionately affected. And this is compounded by the fact that at Littlebrook, we're losing an AIS teacher and instructional aides that support special needs kids. I'm also concerned that the district's resources do not appear to be allocated fairly or in a manner consistent with our professed values. Are all elementary schools equally impacted by the staff cuts? Can some of the supervisory positions at Valley Road be consolidated with less direct impact on our kids? Is there a plan in place to address what happens if Littlebrook receives 20 or 30 new students after the school year starts, which typically happens every year? Transportation costs are up almost 6% in the proposed budget, yet the district has chosen to begin providing bus transportation for every child enrolled in the dual language immersion program who lives beyond walking distance of Community Park. Why is this policy changed now when the district is struggling to control costs? The district has also chosen to expand the DLI program, so next year there will no longer be a traditional kindergarten or first grade class, and the children who opt out of DLI will be bused to other schools. So basically it sounds like it's becoming a magnet school. Where do these children go who opt out, and are the receiving schools provided with enough resources to educate them? How is equity achieved when DLI classrooms have 2 teachers and 12 to 15 students, while Littlebrook currently has 21 first graders per class? I've also heard the district is cutting resources from AIS, but rolling out a new gifted and talented program. This may just be a rumor. Most of our information has come from word of mouth and not direct information. So if there's a gifted and talented program that's being rolled out, why is it coming out now, and why is it at the expense of children who need additional support just to meet grade level expectations? Small classes and AIS teachers are not bells and whistles. If we truly value equity and excellence in our schools, if equity is not just a pretty buzzword, we should not accept larger classes as an inevitability. If you cut teachers when enrollment is rising and lose excellent teachers like Eva Genova in the process, and if you cut AIS resources, you are failing to uphold our values, and you are failing our most vulnerable children. So I ask that you please take another look at the budget and find a way to cut costs without cutting teaching positions that directly impact our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Corinne Ryan Brennan, and after her would be Jane Manor.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. I sent an email to some of you last evening. It was very late in the evening, but I would like to read at least a portion of that email. Perhaps everyone didn't get a chance to read it. I write this email on behalf of my 2 children who are currently enrolled at Littlebrook, as well as on behalf of my 2 children who will be students there in the fall of 2020. I write in support of the Accelerated Intervention Services Program. My daughter is currently receiving support through this program, and the strides she has made over the past few months are nothing short of incredible. My daughter is very much aware of what her peers can do and what she isn't capable of doing yet. Earlier this year, she was struggling with reading and was shutting down at school because she felt she wasn't as smart as her peers. Once my daughter was placed in AIS, she began to gain more confidence in her reading ability. 2 weeks ago, my daughter read a 29-page book, The Little Engine That Could. She was not perfect, but when she faltered, she corrected herself and continued on. 6 months ago, she would have been in tears running up to her bedroom and hiding. I tell you about my daughter because she is what the AIS program was designed for. She is one of the vulnerable students who is struggling to keep up with a curriculum that seems to ask more and more of our children each year. Unfortunately, my understanding is that one of the 3 AIS teachers at Littlebrook, as well as at the other elementary schools, will either be let go or reassigned next year. In Littlebrook specifically, this will most certainly result in less support to students like my daughter. To add to my frustration, it is my understanding that the AIS teacher at Littlebrook will be moved to a new gifted and talented program. While I'm sure that a gifted and talented program would be well received by parents who believe their children are above their grade level, it seems counterintuitive to offer such a program at the expense of our most vulnerable children who are struggling to even meet the minimum demands of their grade level. I understand that a similar scenario will be implemented for the science program at Littlebrook. I have heard that the full-time science teacher will be repurposed next year, dividing her day between teaching science and the new gifted and talented program. Again, I am left wondering how a new, unheard-of program that benefits a small portion of the students can take resources away from an entire school. I question the alternatives that were identified to meet the shortfall in our budget and the rationale behind beginning and expanding programs in a year where the board will be cutting faculty and staff. For example, the dual language immersion program is being expanded for the 2019-2020 school year. From what I've been able to determine, the class sizes in kindergarten this year are around 12 students. The program will also start offering free transportation to children in the DLI program that are not zoned for community park. At a time when transportation costs are rising, I again question this decision. It remains unclear to me if the children opting out of the DLI program will also be offered free busing to the other elementary schools, 2 of which are currently at or above capacity. I respectfully ask that before you vote tonight on the budget, you reevaluate starting a program such as Gifted and Talented and expanding an underutilized program such as dual language immersion when we have a $2 million deficit. While both are worthwhile programs for the future, let's focus our resources on appropriate staffing and helping all students achieve grade level goals before we add any bells and whistles. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Cochran, would you like to?
I would. First of all, thank you so much for your comments. I know they're heartfelt, and I'm grateful for the support that your daughter's received and the successes that she's had. I just want to clarify a few misconceptions that I know are out there, and you did indicate that you've heard rumors, you haven't heard anything official. We regularly evaluate our programs. Those that are required by the state. And this year we're continuing our evaluation of our math program, and we have recommendations moving forward with that. We're also reevaluating the program. It's really our enrichment program, and we are required by the state to have one. But the state doesn't tell us exactly how we have to implement it. And I can promise you this, that when Annie, our assistant superintendent of curriculum, and myself gathered with the 30 staff who were committed to to starting a program and defining one for this district, it was very clear that we wanted a program that was grounded in equity. It was going to be a program that was going to provide enrichment for all students, that was going to provide a framework for the things that we're doing already to do that, and then expand those opportunities for our kids. So we looked at the work of Joseph Renzulli from the University of Connecticut, his school-wide enrichment model. We are not looking at a program that is going to provide just for a narrowly defined, sort of academically advanced student. We are looking to provide more opportunities for all students. And we want to do that with the resources we have already. There is no additional commitment of personnel to doing that, and we are not looking to take the AIS teachers and have them do that work. So I just want to, we are still in the process of doing that evaluation, which is why people haven't heard about it yet. So we go through a very careful process of meeting with our teachers, our supervisors. We visit other schools. We do our research on evidence-based programs. We gather lots of data, and then we begin to talk to the Student Achievement Committee of the board for our recommendations. Like, we haven't taken those steps yet. So we're still in our internal review, and we're not 100% sure exactly what framework we're going to be putting out and what it will look like, but I can promise you this: it's going to be a program that's grounded in our values around equity and meet the expectations and standards that we have before us for the state. So, Annie, I don't know if you want to say anything more about that particular issue. Okay. All right. And with DLI, the Dual Language Immersion Program, we are looking very carefully at that program. It's a program that's growing. And so we have, this past year, we did open it up to, we have 4 sections of students in, it's all DLI. We had only 3 or 4 families or students who wanted the traditional program. It didn't make sense for us to run a program for 4 students, and so we did provide those families with an opportunity to go to another school. We didn't get quite the enrollment that we had expected when we opened it up the first year with those kindergarten sections. Partially because we didn't offer transportation was one reason. So we did have some sections of 12 and 13 in that kindergarten. That will be adjusted next year, so those 4 sections moving next year into first grade will only be 3 sections. But we are hopeful that if we are opening up the DLI program to the full district, that we will have students coming to us from the other schools, and that we will actually be able to lower class sizes in those other schools. One of the struggles that we have as a district is the small number of sections we have at each grade level. So if I have 50 students in first grade, am I going to create a class of 2 classes of 25, or am I going to create 3 classes of what would that be, like 17, 17, 16? Those are struggles that we have. If that number goes up by just 1 or 2 students, it may mean that we have to add an additional teacher. So the idea of being able to take those students who may be interested in being part of the DLI program and allow for them to move there may actually save us staffing. So we're trying to look at this in a very holistic way. There are lots of, and so I know that when people look at one particular grade level, they're saying, oh, there's class sizes of 12. That will be adjusted for next year. There are also much higher class sizes at CP, and the same thing at Littlebrook. There are first grades of 21, but in the second grades at Littlebrook, there are 15, 15, 15, and 13. And it varies from grade to grade. We can't predict, it's not an exact science to figure out who's going to be moving in and whether I'm going to have triplets in a particular grade level, and that can make a difference in those class sizes. So we do look very carefully at enrollments across the district, every class, and we strive to have a balance, and we try to be equitable in our distribution of resources across the schools. So I wanted to be able to put that out there.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. The next person up would be Jane Manor. Manor? I apologize if I get the names.
That's okay, there's an S on the end.
Manners, sorry.
I'm Jane Manners. I live on Wheat Sheaf Lane, and I have 3 kids, or 2 kids this year, 3 kids next year in the Princeton Public Schools. One at JW, one at Littlebrook, and another coming to Littlebrook. And I wanted to speak tonight as a Littlebrook parent, as a parent of children in the Princeton Public Schools, and as a taxpayer and resident of Princeton. I'm here along with many other parents of children in Eva Genova's 2nd grade class at Littlebrook. Eva is the staff member who is being let go at Littlebrook. I thought it might be helpful for everyone to see the show of hands of who is a parent of Eva Genova's children. So this is a pretty good representation on a Tuesday night at 9:30 of the dedication of these parents to a teacher who's been tremendous for our kids. And I know that you all received, or many of you received, kind of letters, testimonials about her abilities as a teacher. And I think you'll hear more later this evening. So I wanted to point out the loss that Princeton experiences when a teacher like this gets let go. It's a loss for the staff, it's a loss for the kids, it's a loss for the parents, and it's a loss for the community. It sends a very dismaying message to all of us. That gets coupled with the kind of questions about enrollment, and I really appreciate Steve's comments just now about how enrollment is it's a moving target and it's hard to predict. But I know from the school secretary that this year, for instance, Littlebrook has received 24 additional students since the start of school. 4 of them have come since April, and we're expecting 2 more in May and 1 more in June. So I want to make sure that you guys have the ability to make sure that our class sizes aren't monstrous by the end of the school year, right? So retaining flexibility with staffing is important. I want to speak about, this is in my mode as parent of kids in the public schools, about class size, because I've heard some disturbing comments about class size as kind of a luxury, that Princeton can't afford small class sizes. And I actually think that gets it totally wrong. I think small sizes are at the heart of equity. They're at the heart of wellness, and they're at the heart of excellence, which are the 3 qualities that Steve's very welcome letter this afternoon spelled out about what the district is trying to achieve. If you have a large class, then the teacher's attention is distributed among many children, and each child's education suffers a little bit. And frankly, who suffers the most in situations like that? It's not the children of parents who can afford to supplement their children's education out of the classroom. It's the kids who don't have those resources, right? It's the most vulnerable who suffer when class sizes expand. So I think as we think about the hard choices that are coming down the pike, we need to remember that class size is critical to good teaching and to equity. It's not a bell and whistle. And my third comment is as a taxpayer and as a community member, because I hear you when you say that a budget is about values and it tells a story. And the choices that you are going to have to make in the months and years ahead are very much about values. And they're not just the school's values, they're the town's values. So when I hear things like identifying efficiencies and savings and restructuring certain functions and reconsidering staffing levels, what I hear is laying people off, privatizing services, and doing other things that speak to our values as a community. So as you consider these options, which obviously you need to lift up every rug and check wherever you can for efficiencies, a word that I hate, actually. I think you need to be very transparent with the community. You need Betsy's email address where people can send ideas about cost savings. I mean, not to Betsy specifically, but the one. But you need forums. You need to alert the community that you are making these decisions, because these are it's not just about the individual saving or the individual efficiency. It's about what we are as a community. So you need to get out in front of this and involve the community in having these conversations so that when you make decisions, you are informed about the community's values. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Katie Dunn? I think Katie Dunn is next. Katie here? No. Allison Block?
I'm typically a back row kind of person. I don't really come out to speak much for things like this. So I was told to read this letter, which I will, but I wanted to speak off the top of my head for a moment. I live on Clover Lane. I have 3 kids in Princeton Public School System. I've been in the school system for about 9 years now. 2 of my kids went through Littlebrook from start to finish, JW. I now have a freshman at Princeton High School. I can assure you, you have some clunkers out there for teachers. So some of them, some really good ones. I don't know how it works with tenure and how you look into this, but it's a real shame when you are in a crisis or pre-crisis type situation when you have to just cut someone simply because they're just new. I think that when you step back and look at the bigger picture, you will realize that it's a detriment to the school system to just simply cut someone due to lack of tenure. I understand there's a budget cut, but. So I'm speaking on behalf of Eva Genova's second grade class. We're dismayed and deeply saddened by the news that she's going to be cut. So I just wanted to read you a letter that we wrote as a unit and everyone signed, all the parents. From the moment you walk into Ms. Genova's classroom, it's clear that she's 100% committed to her students. Not only is the classroom extraordinarily neat and well organized, despite the children's amazing tendency toward chaos, but its layout is clearly and thoughtfully designed to inspire learning. Last year, Ms. Genova told us at back to school night, she noticed that children in her class weren't spending long in the reading nook. When she asked why, she learned that part of the problem was the seating. There weren't enough inviting, comfy chairs. So over the summer, she took the time to repurpose old truck tires, scouring them, painting them, and combining them with pillows to turn them into bright, comfortable, and amazingly functional reading seats. Her creative solutions seem to have a desired effect, and the children visit the reading nook whenever they possibly can. This instance of going the extra mile is absolutely typical of Eva. Every day, Eva stays late to organize the classroom, go over the children's work, and prepare for the next day. She's constantly on the lookout for innovative teaching techniques that might better suit a child's learning style. And she's so tuned in to each of her students' needs that she has an unerring sense for what they'll like and what they'll get excited by. As a classroom leader, she strikes a perfect balance among being kind, and treating all children fairly, and setting exacting standards. The kids both adore her and know she has high expectations for their academic performance and classroom deportment, which they work hard to meet. It's no wonder she gets the results that she does. Over the past year, many of us have marveled at how our children have developed in Eva's capable hands, both academically and socially. One parent wrote of her son, his love of and enthusiasm for math has only increased since September. And even more impressive, he's gone from a reluctant sounder out of words to a real reader. He devours any fantasy novel he can get his hands on. For us, there's no doubt that the cause of his transformation, it's Miss Genova's dedicated and loving and inspiring teaching. Another parent was particularly impressed that her daughter had recently started to spontaneously sit down and write, anything from short novels to journal entries, thanks to Miss Genova's encouragement. Miss Genova, this parent wrote, has the rare ability to make students enthusiastic about their subjects, leading them to pursue learning outside the classroom. I would actually like to read that line again because it's very true. She has the rare ability to make students enthusiastic about their subjects, and they really want to continue learning outside the classroom. I've seen this very much with my own son. Thanks to Miss Genova, one child brought up concepts of simile and metaphor at the dinner table discussion that ended up revolving around what makes something poetic. The parent had no doubt this conversation had been inspired by Eva's teachings. Parents have also been impressed by Eva's attention to students' emotions, helping them to handle complicated situations with friends with grace and discretion. In one instance, Eva, upon noticing a student was having trouble with a friend, asked the student to write her a letter about the situation. Eva then wrote her own letter back, gently helping to craft a resolution to the situation. Another parent commented that never once over the entire year had her child come home with stories of classroom upset or strife. Somehow, this parent marveled, Eva was able to attend to each child's individual needs in order to preserve a productive, harmonious, and respectful classroom. One parent of a student with special needs was especially grateful for Eva's empathy and kindness as she gave the child the gentle push he needed to participate in group activities and connect with his peers, noting, "She treats my son with unwavering respect and through her examples teaches his classmates about tolerance and inclusion." As parents, we feel that letting Eva go does a huge disservice to Princeton Public Schools and to our children. Whichever school or whichever profession is lucky enough to hire Eva in the wake of all of this has found a rare gem. Someone who combines perfectly the professionalism, talent, dedication, and love one looks for in a teacher of young children. We are absolutely confident she will thrive in her next position, and the community she joins couldn't be luckier. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think, is Liz Young here? No. Otherwise, I think that was all that was signed up. Thank you all very much for your comments. Well, we have a second comment period. Did you all want to? Oh, this was the agenda item period, and we have an open item at the end, but, oh, the budget here, I'm sorry. Okay, well, keep going then. Fine. Good. Sorry. So I don't have your names, but whoever would like to come forward and just state your name and address, and again, 3 minutes, but continue, please.
Hi, I know you missed me. Hi, I'm Bob Corral. I teach science at the high school, and right now I printed out and I brought a copy of page 17 of the budget presentation about the staff reductions, and I have some questions and some comments. First of all, I look at the number of FTE teaching position reduction, 4.2 at the high school. I see one listed for science. I personally know of at least another person, another half position from my department that was eliminated that's not counted here. So I kind of wonder about how the math was done here. Same way I wonder about how some of my students do their math. The other thing is, as I look down this list, you go down to the bottom of the list and it says other staff reductions, including administration. If I look at this very carefully, if I understand everything that I read, there is not a single person at the supervisor level, assistant principal, or principal level that has been reduced, not a single position that's been reduced at that level in this budget. Is that correct?
Director of Communications.
That's a supervisory position?
It's a director position, but no, you would be correct. No departmental supervisors, subject area supervisors, or assistant principals.
And the math would be that if you eliminated a supervisor, you could save 2 teachers, roughly. So you're making the decision that the supervisor is more valuable for the education of the students than the teacher in the classroom.
No, it's not the way the decision gets made, but
that's the way it looks.
I understand.
All right, that was it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jen Bajuni. I'm the mother of 2 students at the high school. I'm also the PHS school librarian, and I am the PRA liaison from the high school. On April 18th, as most people were getting ready to enjoy their 3-day weekend, maybe to celebrate the holidays, at PHS, 18 meetings were held to tell our teachers that they were completely or partially riffed, meaning their positions were cut either partially or wholly. 18 meetings just at PHS, 18 meetings just of teachers. With so many meetings, it meant 20-minute time slots for each teacher, 20 minutes to tell someone that they no longer had a job, and for some, that meant that they no longer have a career. 20 minutes to tell a mother or a father or a new homeowner that they wouldn't have a job to support their family or pay their mortgage. It's through no fault of their own, they were told, but due to the budget. And as they were hearing that these were impersonal decisions, not meant as a reflection on them, that they would get recommendations if they asked for them, some wept and some fronted a stiff upper lip. The budget presentation says that it's 4.2 FTEs, but it's actually 6.6. The math teacher is a 0.8, not a 0.4. There were 2 special ed full-time positions that were cut that weren't mentioned there at all. And there was also a 0.2 performing arts position that was also cut that wasn't mentioned in the budget proposal. And I know because I was at their meetings. Okay. So the total number, however, of people who were cut was 8 because, like I said, some of them were part-timers. So there were 8 who saw their positions fully cut. I sat in on more than half of these meetings of the full and partial RIFs, and in my calendar I entitled it called Horrible Day. So here we are during Teacher Appreciation Week, and we've gotten messages and luncheons celebrating our value. VR administration, according to the budget report, were cut, so we're sharing the burden. Well, most were attrition, and all were more aligned to support staff than to true administration. This is a misleading number. No supervisors, no assistant principals, no administrator at VR capable of doing evaluations was cut. When we look at these mostly school-based RIFs, these are cuts to the heart and soul of the district. The ones who have the contact with the students, the ones who will keep class sizes down and electives running, who provide the support. This was not a shared burden. Whatever scalpel cuts were done, I can't see them. To me, they look more like hatchet blows.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Paula Jack-Lou. I'm a teacher science at the high school, and I'm the proud parent of 2 graduates from Princeton High School. When I started here about 28 years ago, I remember passing my principal at the time in the cafeteria, and she called me over and she said, "Paula, we love your work, but I'm sorry, my darling, we can't afford you." At that time, that's how I was told I didn't have a job, because our budget had failed. At the time, we had, I guess, it was a different time, it was a different place. However, one of my coworkers, Janet Britton, decided to go part-time. And it's because of her that I still have that position and I still am here today. So if you want to talk about creativity, that's certainly one way. In piggybacking on what some of my colleagues have said, perhaps an administrator could go 3/4 time and maybe free up some of that salary for one of our desperately needed teachers. That's an idea. I just would like to make some quick comments because I know time is limited and it's late. I'm still scratching my head as to why this community needs a charter school or even has one. When I go to other workshops, people will actually approach me and say, "Is it true that you guys have a charter school?" And I say, "Yeah." "Why?" I said, "I don't know, go ask them." So I just thought I would put that on the table, that we have some artificial hierarchies in this community that are reinforced systemically. As far as a comment that was made earlier about clunker teachers, I don't know, maybe I'm a clunker teacher, I don't know. But I can tell you what my day included. My day included a full day of teaching and then going to an equity workshop, which was brilliantly hosted by one of our teachers, Dr. Barnes Johnson. I see some of the teachers here came from that equity workshop who are now here at this Board of Education meeting, and we'll drive home and we'll come back tomorrow and we're going to do our level best to teach all of our students. I'm white, but I care about every single kid that walks down that hallway. Over the years, I've seen classes that benefited students that were at risk, and I'm going to list some of them off that have disappeared. It wasn't my choice, wasn't the choice of any science teacher that I knew of, but we lost horticulture, we lost ecology, we lost earth science. How much more germane can you be than earth science, than teaching earth science? What is a more useful science in today's daily press releases about climate change, mass extinction, and yet we don't offer that? Those courses offered an avenue of discovery for underserved students. I look at the textbooks, the way they're chosen. We're finally replacing the Bio 1 book this year. I believe the copyright on it is 2006. And I've been advocating for the replacement of that book for at least 6 years, and it took until now. Yes, I agree. We have to be very creative, but I think that the staff needs to be asked directly about some of the ways to save costs. Here's an example. If you're planning on laying off somebody from maintenance, think about how if we had an extra person in maintenance, maybe they could be unclogging the downspouts at the high school. Because I'm at the high school at all kinds of weird hours, I see these downspouts backing up. If you want to talk about why we have mold, that certainly is one of the contributing reasons. Imagine if we were able to do preventive maintenance instead of reactive maintenance, how much money we would probably save. All of us as teachers and students, we walk the halls every day. We see these abilities to have cost savings. Now, I was raised by a person who was in maintenance. And, you know, my students, they hear these stories all the time. I rebuilt 2 car engines. So when I walk around the school, I see things all the time. Like, for example, when you go down in the lower hallway where Numina is, there's a gap with a little bit of insulation that could close. It's a huge crack in a lot of the doors. Think of the heating savings that we could see. So we all see specific things. So my recommendation is when you have the board retreat in July, maybe we should have a retreat where it's teachers and board, not where we have these artificial separations that I think prevent us from really being creative and really will engender more trust. So thank you very much for hearing my comments. I'm grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paula.
Are there any other comments on the budget?
I'm on the list, right?
We're off list.
Oh, you're
Go
off.
ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Martha Friend, science lab teacher at Littlebrook. And I had to run out of here because I think I used to babysit with her younger sister, a parent who sits here. And I just say that because I went to Riverside, went through the system, parents still live here, taxpayers. And the reason I share that is because I want to come back to something you said, Steve, when you were talking to Michelle and saying that we are adding 1 or 2 teachers, that we know that you are deeply invested in making sure that this school system is accessible and fulfills our promise of equity and excellence for all. But when you say that we've increased by 2 positions, you don't say that we were already at a deficit meeting the needs of all of our families. So I hear what you're saying, but I'm not sure that we're not there yet. And so I think what Michelle, what you said was just on point. I wanted to snap at you. When you're looking at this story, I'm not sure that everybody understands what all like the 0.2 positions mean, and I know some of my colleagues have already kind of shared some of these things, but saying who is feeling the pain is important. And reading between the lines, and we see at JW, there's like, I think it was a 0.2 extra math position, where that's not just for anybody. I mean, you talk to the math teacher who is running that program. Those are our at-risk kids. Those are the kids who can't get this help at any other time. I'm not an expert in that, but I think you need to know the full stories of every line item, of every position that's being cut, or the story doesn't make any sense. So I just wanted to point that out. I also want to reinforce this idea that you have a staff who wants to be in partnership with you in meeting these things, but we're not being asked. This notion of a savings plan, we had somebody come to a meeting, talk to us for 5 minutes. Okay, we might have gotten an email about it, but I'm talking about in the classroom, program abilities to save money. Talk to us. I think I've said this repeatedly. Talk to us. It can't be an afterthought. This is about, you have meetings that are scheduled in our building, so make it an agenda item. What could we offer up? Yep. I think it's a disservice to ignore this. And just the last thing that I would say, I've lost my, oh no. We had an energy audit, and I think I said this at the last meeting I was at. You kind of maybe off the cuff said, and in that energy audit, we learned that if we just turn the lights off, we could save 4 teachers, pay for 4 teachers, not save, pay for 4 teachers and their benefits with those costs going up. But there should have been an immediate action on that. I don't think our custodians have heard anything about it. I know teachers haven't. That should be immediate. What are we doing about it? Not just about saving teachers, but investing the money where it should be. So we're here. Let us work with you on all of this. But it's got to be about all of our kids.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further comment on the budget?
Can the
Okay.
board talk about it more? I guess I'm trying to figure out what's the procedure now. Little story. The reason I got interested in being on the school board was because a teacher, in my opinion, was wrongfully not given tenure, and this room was full of students, high school boys crying because this guy was being let go. And I talked to a board member afterwards who said, "We didn't know what to do. We saw all these people wanting them, and it seemed like there was something else going on behind the scenes, and it really bothered them." So my question is now, we've heard a lot of good emotional pleas, support for different teachers. What can we do now to deal with this? I mean, is our only option to vote on the budget? Or is there some way that we can help some of these people save their jobs? And so I'm kind of lost on that. I'm torn on that. I know that we have a math supervisor who's resigned. Can that just not be filled and just keep 2 teachers? We have a vice principal be a principal at the high school. Can we just not hire another vice principal and keep, I don't know how many positions? I don't know the answer, but what can we do sitting here right now other than vote yay or nay on the budget? And I know Tom will say we have to have it approved by May 14th, otherwise we're in trouble with the state and the county. But I just don't know what our options are, and I don't want 6 months from now someone to say, "Why did you guys do that?" And I would say, "Well, I didn't know what I could do otherwise, other than vote yay or nay." So can we talk a little bit about what we can do in response to all these really good comments? And Steve, I know your heart is in the right place, so your heart's in a better place than mine when it comes to dealing with the people. So I can't criticize you at all. But sitting here today, what can we do? So Beth, you know Robert's rules better than I do, so I'm going to be quiet and you tell me what we're going to do.
I don't think this is a question of Robert's rules, Bill, but thank you for that. Tom, do you want to make a comment?
Sure. Let me answer the easy question first, which is, what if we don't have a budget by May 14th? Not an option. You have to have a budget by May 14th. That's the state law. You have to sit at the board table until you have a budget. That's the way it works. Right now, you have a tentative budget that's been approved and submitted to the county superintendent. And the next step is for the board to approve a final budget. The board can make changes to that budget, but whatever changes you make, they have to be documented in a motion to adjust your budget. So that's the answer to your question. If there's going to be any changes to your budget, you'd have to specifically identify what those changes would be.
And I maybe just harken back to what Michelle said a little earlier about the fact that not everyone can have someone come to this meeting and speak for them. And I think if we as a board start opening up the budget, I very much appreciate that people are coming to speak, but our job is to support the work of our administrators. We hire them to do that, and they've spent months on this. And I think it's important that we guide them and we share when we feel the direction is off, and when we are. It's very hard to sit and hear what people are saying about this beloved teacher, and I agree with you, and it's not an easy thing, but I think as a board we've given our administration a task. We've been working on this with them for months, and for us at the last minute to start delving into numbers and making trade-offs, I don't think that that's our role.
But like Tom said, if we approve the budget, we can always work. And if there is found money through savings, through the
Correct.
grace of whatever, if there is found monies, then things can be, especially with FTEs, can be made whole, things like that. I mean, there are things that we can do. So those kinds of things are not set in stone to answer your question, but I think it does give us the gravity of the situation and what Bill's saying and what Tom has laid before us is that, and I think Michelle said this at one of our meetings, if we're going to make the hard decisions, then we've got to wear it on our backs and we've got to sit here as a board and defend the work that we do. I'm the last person that I guess should say this, but given, my position as a Cranberry representative, this is not my district. I am only part of your district, but I am the longest standing board member on this board. I've never seen a more great position. So I'm very respectful of the work that's being done, but I do know in Cranberry, when we lost all of our state aid, that we did cut back a lot of FTEs, and then during the course of some creativity from our teachers and from our staff, and also from our facilities. And I've heard that from a lot of teachers, and I, as chair of facilities for the last, I won't tell you how many years, then you'll start adding things up, but there's, there are monies to be found if we really, what do they say? If you find the pennies, the dollars will come. So I think if we all, pretty bright people in this room, and I think we all know what our charge is, and I think we've got some, don't you hide from me. I think we have some very positive powers at play, but just from a facility standpoint and from the support that I hear from the parents and from the teachers, we all know that we have a job to do, and we have to save money to save the people that we care for, and from the great respect that we have for the staff that looks after our children, and that's at the root of what we want to get to. So that's what I'm hearing. I don't really have a place to say that, but I know we've lived it in Cranberry, so I'll share that with you from our perspective.
Thank you, Evelyn.
So, I would like to comment and build on Mrs. Spahn's comment and other comments that have been made. And this is not going to solve all our problems, but might restore a position or two at Littlebrook or elsewhere. But as people have noted, the reimbursement for special ed went from $180 down to $80,000. It's hard for me to believe that's an appropriate number. But it's also a process and an equity issue, and Jessica mentioned this. All of these kids are our kids. I don't want them to feel special or isolated, or and when they go into the resource center, when they see a teacher's aide, I don't want our staff having to count what belongs to Princeton, what belongs to Cranberry. So we have a formula that doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so the whole culture of our system around equity is designed not to measure things like that. So it's hard for me to believe that $80,000 reimbursement on special ed is the appropriate number, and they were paying $180. And I would like to make a motion to come up with a formula that's fair and doesn't in any way make the kids feel different, but that reflects the cost of special education, which is more like $12 million. And that may help in some ways.
So I heard you make a motion?
Yes. I don't know if this is the right time to do it, but we're talking about the budget.
Yeah, as a point of order, I believe we have a contract, the send and receive agreement that has a mechanism in it for doing the itemization. So
It wasn't finalized.
the contract was not
No,
finalized?
no, no. The contract was, the special ed part wasn't. The formula, the whole thing wasn't, the special ed part
Yes, it
wasn't.
was finalized and it was signed, and it is a contract. It is a send-receive contract. It's a 10-year contract. And I will say again that the special needs of the Cranberry students can be itemized by Princeton, and Cranberry will quite happily pay the difference. $80,000 was a starting point. If Princeton should find by their audit, and we will review that audit, if they should find by that audit that the number is different, then Cranberry has said, and Cranberry expressed to the Cranberry board, and I have expressed to this board and to you openly that Cranberry will pay that. Cranberry also has given this district $5.8 million. So, I mean, we give Princeton what the statute holds, and then with this situation on this resource room, we would happily help out with that. This is an item for Mickey to work out with our BOE and to put appropriate numbers together. We're not going to raise that number fictitiously. It will have to be itemized, and this is a number for our auditors. We're audited, you're audited. We can't just throw you money unless it's verified. So you can't put a motion on the table to change a number when you don't understand where that number
Okay.
comes from.
I think we're getting away from the agenda item, which is really, we're here to approve the budget. And I think obviously there's some difference of opinion or understanding about this, the language of the Cranberry Agreement. And I think several of us who were here last year when we did approve it recall that there was a provision for this mechanic. And it was, we were told at that time that it would be, rather than a fixed number, was going to be calculated, and I think that is what's happening now with Tom. But I mean, we could move to put this to the Finance Committee if that's where it's appropriate. So, Michelle?
Point of order, Madam
Yes.
Chair. There is a motion on the floor. Somebody's either going to second it or they're not.
Okay. Do we have a
So
second?
can we-
I'll second it.
I guess I'm still trying to get
Second.
my question asked. If we don't have council present.
Correct.
But we have a legally binding agreement. So I guess I'm not judging whether the payment is correct or incorrect. I'm just wondering whether it's possible for us by motion to change a legally binding contract.
I do not believe that's true, but I think the motion was a question. You want to repeat the motion, Dan, so we have it correctly?
So to amend by mutual agreement, and you can't amend a contract by mutual agreement of the parties. This is not a unilateral request. It's to work with Cranberry on a fair reimbursement agreement for special ed that reflects our costs, doesn't burden the staff by having to count, or place the kids in an awkward situation as it relates to teachers' aides or the resource center and so forth and so on. And so, yes, it can be done by mutual agreement.
So your motion is to work with Cranberry to adjust the reimbursement mechanism to be more equitable.
Yes.
And it's been seconded.
And it's been seconded,
And I'll
so we
call
have
the
to,
question.
you call the question. Okay, we'd like to have a show of hands, and all in favor?
Is there going to be any discussion on that? Because I'd like to weigh in on that.
Okay, discussion, please, go ahead.
Evelyn, didn't your board just approve the agreement with Princeton for next year?
We just approved the agreement and we just approved the 80,000, yes.
Right. So your board has already approved an agreement. Your budget reflects that. That was the discussion that the BAs had when they were doing their budget development. I wasn't there at the time. I can't speak to it. All I have are documents that indicate that that's what was agreed to for budgeting purposes. So I'm not sure how this is going to impact the Cranberry District, and I've got to question the fairness to Cranberry. From, if I was sitting in that chair as the BA, I would say, we talked about this, we had a deal, and now Princeton's reneging on it.
Except that there is a mechanism in place, and if you drill down, the mechanism in place is that at the end of the year, there is a time to rectify the account.
Right.
So it's not that we're not paying what we owe for for the services. So there is a mechanism in place. So the motion on the table is actually an incorrect motion. We put out a number, but that, depending on every year, there's going to be, we've got a 10-year contract. Every year, there's going to be a different number of kids that go through the system. So there has to be, we have to start somewhere. The BAs agreed on $80,000, but they also agreed that there would be some accounting done to rectify the account at the end of the year. And that was the conversation that our board had, to say that we're not just going to give you that money and say, there you go, that's all you get. The whole point of the conversation was that the mechanism in place is, rather than not give you any money until the end of the year and have you do the accounting from day one till the end, that's not enough for your resource room. We wanted to give you, we actually, I thought, in good faith and being good stewards, we're giving money to the resource room to help support that. And remember, that's very independent of other contracts. This is for the resource room and only for the resource room.
Right.
So just as a point of clarification, when will that accounting or analyzing be
Right.
done? Because
Right.
that was the understanding that many of us
Right,
held.
and that's certainly reasonable what you've said there. Yeah. However, I'm not sure whether or not it reflects that in the agreement. I could check that when I see the agreement. But that's consistent with the way that we handle the regular ed portion of the contract. So that, we have a fixed contract based upon X number of students who are attending next year at a cost per pupil. That number gets audited by the DOE, and they come up with a certified tuition rate for the year. And then they also look at the ADE for Cranberry for that
Right.
year and make that comparison. But that adjustment does not get paid until 2 years later. So my point is that we could talk about all this stuff now about Resource Center. It has no impact on this
year's
upcoming budget.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. And there is, and just to further clarify, there is a mechanism in place, Dan, through the Power School database where we can run the numbers of sections of how many students from Cranberry are in a particular resource room and the number of students in that class. So we can do all the math without having to embarrass students in any way. I mean, it's all being done really through Mickey's office and Tom's.
But the amount has dropped from 180 to 80, as you heard from Daphne. Our special ed expenses have gone up. We offer fabulous special ed services.
Remember, we have less students as well. So is it possible that the numbers have gone down? I mean, I would never have known in the many years I've been on the board how many special ed students we even have. It is just, this is a contract. It is very private. We keep the children very, we keep, out of respect, we keep that very private. I would not know how many students we had, but given that we have less students than we had, and we have a percentage of the population, it would make sense that we likely have less students in the resource room just by process of lower enrollment.
And I just make a point of order that when we're talking about numbers like 180, I don't know where that number came from, if it came from a member of the public.
No, it was what Stephanie what they used to pay us, and a couple of years ago it got changed to 80.
But again, we haven't talked to Tom about that. I've never seen that. I'm not sure that it's, I'm not sure where we're going with this. Dan, do you want to continue the motion? We had a motion, a second. We've discussed it. Do we want to call the question?
Well, here's one other thing. In our audit last year, the one thing we got called on was through Mickey's group, where she had to have better detail on special education costs. And there's a form now that we had to give, to say that we did the audit. So we should never know any child's name, but the IEP system, these kids are seeing different, specialists and this and that. The whole IEP can totally be costed.
Great.
And we would never know a kid's name. That would be the last thing I would ever want. But it's very easy. I understand it's a lot of work, but it's easy going
forward. Which is
forward.
why we now know that we can rectify.
I'm talking. I'm still speaking,
Excuse
please.
me. but
Oh,
just-
sorry, Debbie.
yeah.
I apologize. I apologize.
So, we definitely can do this going forward because we have this mechanism now, and this, and they meet with all their counselors, so the counselors know what services they're getting, and we should be able to cost it backwards.
Thank you. I think
Yeah.
we've been clear that we can cost it and we are costing it, and that it does not relate to the budget that we are currently voting on right now, which is $100 million. So I would suggest that we call, either you withdraw or we call the question so we can move on to the main order of business.
Can I just make one more quick point? So I'm looking at the agreement right now, and it does describe how you're supposed to calculate actual costs. So I kind of feel like it's great to know what it is, but I feel like it already takes care of it. So looking at the actual agreement, I believe it takes care of it. So you would be asking them to do what's already in the agreement. So maybe the motion would be to do something sooner. But I feel like the agreement already does what you're asking it to do. So maybe the question is more, when can we actually do some of the math as opposed to what the agreement already says to do?
And could it be reported to the Finance Committee quarterly or twice a year and updated as we create a procedure for that?
We could move this to the Finance Committee to create a procedure and be more, have more oversight on the procedure.
Okay, I would agree to that.
So do you withdraw your original motion?
I table it, yes.
Well, tabling means it comes back in this
No,
meeting.
Tonight, no, I'll withdraw it.
Sorry, I
this
went to
time.
training over the
Yes,
weekend.
yes.
So motion's withdrawn. So I made a motion to put it to the Finance Committee. Can I have a second? Thank you, Bill. All in favor? Motion passed. We're moving that item to the Finance Committee. Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
And now we're back to our main motion. Shall I introduce the main motion? Are we done with discussion now on the budget? Okay, so we are now in item H, public hearing on the budget. We've had that. Item I, adoption of the budget for 2019-20. Shall we do a roll call? We need a motion. Greg, do we have a second? Brian? And now we can call the question. Through a roll call?
Just 1 second.
Okay.
Beth Barron,
Yes.
Debbie Brownfield,
No.
Daniel Dart,
No.
Jessica Deutsch,
Yes.
Bill Hare.
I hate these hard votes. Okay, I think I'm gonna have to go with a no for now.
Betsy Baglio,
Yes.
Brian McDonald,
Yes.
Gregory Stankiewicz,
Yes.
Michelle Tuck Ponder,
For the reasons I stated earlier, no.
Evelyn Swan.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-4.
Thank you. Next item is item IB, health insurance adjustment, 2019-20. And this refers to the adjustment. Oh, it's a part of the same thing? Okay. It's a tuition raise? Okay. Item 2, tuition rates 2019-20. This is resolved that the Board of Education approve the estimated tuition rates for the 2019-20 school year as follows, as listed in the agenda. Can I have a motion? Bill, second? Brian?
Could I just clarify for the public who may not have read this, that we don't actually accept out-of-district students at the moment, but legally we need to approve tuition rates should that come up.
Thank you, Betsy. Can we call the question?
Beth Baron?
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld?
Yes.
Daniel Dart?
Yes.
Susan Deutsch?
Yes.
Bill Hare?
Yes.
Betsy Baglio?
Yes.
Brian McDonald?
Yes.
Gregory Steinquist?
Yes.
Michelle Tuck-Ponder?
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn?
Yes.
Motion carried. Item J, we're back to a public forum now on agenda items only. Are we on agenda? Is it not open? Oh, this is agenda items. Do we have anyone who wants to speak? Okay, we'll can keep going. We're on item K, personnel. The first one, number 1, is resolved that the Board of Education approve the personnel actions and any addendum as recommended by the superintendent and request that a copy of the same be included in the permanent minutes. Do we have any can I have a motion on personnel items? Greg, second Betsy. Do we want to have some discussion? Anyone want to speak for this?
I want to say something.
Yeah, good.
'Cause we actually have some great news. We have with us tonight the person that I would like to recommend to the board as our new Director of Facilities. Mr. David Harding has been sitting in the back for quite a number of hours, and one of the things that David told me when we interviewed was that he actually had watched many of our board meetings prior to coming in. So he's not surprised that he's been here for 3 hours. And I'm sure that he has learned that there's a lot riding on this position. It is an incredibly important position. You heard something about preventative maintenance versus reactive maintenance. You heard about sustainability and cost savings through energy. We are looking forward to your leadership and help in that way. Mr. Harding is coming to us with 6 years of experience as a Director of Facilities in Bernards Township. We just went through CUSAC with flying colors. He's actually just installed the 163 of the Airedale HVAC units that we're putting in place here. He's got a lot of experience there, but his experience doesn't stop with being a Director of Facilities. He has an engineering degree. He has worked for a number of engineering firms. He's been a commissioning agent, sort of looking at how projects go from the design table to actually being constructed. He is someone who comes to us with higher ed experience, having worked as assistant of plant operations at Seton Hall University. And he's run a bike shop, which was an added bonus that I learned about in our conversation.
Oh, that's why.
That's why. Now we know.
There we go. There it is. I get it now.
The thing that I was impressed with the balance that I think David brought to our conversation. It was one where he was excited about buildings and the details of projects and making buildings look great and implementing projects well. But he understood that the buildings are about the people in them, the students and the staff. And he came with, he's able to recite our mission statement, which very few candidates can when they sit across from me. But but I think he comes with a sense of really wanting to be a part of a district that's focused on wellness and learning and innovation and sustainability, and we're tremendously excited to have you here tonight. And you're the first appointment on the agenda, so I wanted to be able to introduce you. I don't know if any of the other members of the interviewing committee wanted to say anything, and I don't know if you wanted to say anything.
I did, with such a lead up, I don't know how anything else to say. I really just practiced standing up and waving. I didn't know.
Yeah.
But
I am very excited. I'm excited about what I can bring to Princeton schools. I understand your needs. They're the needs of many districts. I'm used to looking at things. Downspouts are one of my peeves. They really are. They're very important, and it does create a problem with mold and everything else. But I do walk through buildings and I see things that way. I see details, and I have met such wonderful people in the process of getting here. And that's over with. I mean, the process, that is. I still want to meet more wonderful people. But I thank Steve so much for everything, and Tom as well, and Mark for getting me this far, and the interview crew, a couple of people that I recognize, and Greg and Brian. And also collectively and individually, I want to thank the board for placing your confidence in me, and I won't let you down. We're going to do some great things here. The referendum is very exciting. We're going to do some wonderful things for these kids, for the learning environment, and it is exciting. It's going to be great. And I thank you all very, very much. Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome. We're excited, too. Is there anything else you'd like
no,
to say?
I think that's...
Could we call for a...
We
And could I say one other thing? There's a resignation on the agenda. I just want to note Kelly Curtis and the work she's done in our district in less than a year. I've seen firsthand, I think she's probably been to a record number of student achievement meetings for an administrator in her a supervisor in her first year. But I've seen the care with which she considered students who need more assistance in math and the students who far exceed what we offer here and how to make the right placements for them. So I wish Kelly the best. I think we have no choice but to accept a resignation. I don't know if there's another another option possible, but I wish her the best, and I thank her for her work this year.
Thank you, Betsy. And I also said to Steve on that, we were just so fortunate we had her for a year, because she got so much done, and we're really fortunate. So thank you.
She had an hour-and-a-half commute with two
Yeah,
children at home,
yeah,
so
but
she
we're
was
lucky that we had her for
getting
when we
closer
did.
to home.
Okay, I think we have 4 items on this personnel agenda, and we're going to have a roll call.
Right. Beth Barron?
Yes.
Debbie Bromfeld?
Yes.
Daniel Dart?
Yes.
Jessica Deutsch?
Yes.
Bill Hare?
Yes.
Betsy Baglio?
Yes.
Brian McDonald?
Yes.
Gregory Stankiewicz?
Yes.
Michelle Tuck-Ponder?
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn?
Yes.
Great, motion passed, unanimous.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Next item, appointment of the affirmative action officer. I think we are going to appoint Michael Volpe, thank you, as our affirmative action officer for the remainder of this school year. And the affirmative action officer is authorized to recruit the affirmative action team to conduct a needs assessment and develop a comprehensive equity plan for submission for approval by the board on June 11th and the submission to the County Office of Education on June 14th. So do I have a motion?
I'll move it.
Thank you, Michelle. Do we have a second? Dan? And do we have any discussion?
Who seconded it?
Dan?
Dan?
We'll call the question. Do we do a hand vote or a?
You can do it here.
Okay, give a show of hands for approval. Motion passed. Unanimous? Passed unanimous. Congratulations.
May I ask a question about K? Were those going to be voted separately? I didn't know if
We
you
just agreed to put them together.
put them all together.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Item L, student services, there's a settlement agreement.
It's a consent item.
It's a consent item. Okay, we'll move through that. Item M, award of contract of the air conditioning at Princeton High School gym. Do you want to speak to that,
Yeah,
Greg?
can I just make it, just very, very
Yes.
quickly, give a little bit of context that was sent to the board in advance as
Can we
well.
get a motion on the floor first?
Can we have a motion first? Somebody give me a motion. Betsy, second? Dan? Okay. Greg, discuss.
Okay. On behalf of the Facilities Committee, we had 3 referendum projects that were let out to bid, and the bids came back last week. So we'll be addressing each of the 3, and the Facilities Committee, in conjunction with our professional team, has recommendations on each of these 3. So very briefly, on the first one, which is the award of contract for installing the AC in the high school gym, The bid that came back came in slightly under the estimated budget, and it's the unanimous recommendation of all the professionals and of the Facilities Committee that we accept that bid.
Thank you. So we had a motion, we have discussion. Any questions? We'll call the question.
Beth Barron?
Yes?
Debbie Bronfeld?
Yes.
Daniel Dart?
Yes.
Jessica Deutsch? Bill Hare?
Yes.
Betsy Baglio?
Yes.
Brian McDonald?
Yes.
Gregory Stankiewicz?
Yes.
Michelle Tuck Ponder?
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn?
Yes.
Motion passed, unanimous. Move on to subject 2, rejection of the bid Riverside HVAC installation and electrical upgrade. Can I have a motion? Bill, second. Dan? Greg?
Okay, very, very, very brief context on this. Under state law, there are only 2 opportunities to reject a bid when it comes in. One of the 2 is if the bid comes in above the estimated cost. The second, if there's a legal issue and that bid has to be put aside. So in this case, we're looking at the bid package that was put out to install the HVAC systems that have already been purchased. So this is the installation at Riverside over summer 2019. The bid came back with just one contractor who bid, and the bid was substantially above the estimated cost that we had been led to believe we were looking at under our budget. The Facilities Committee and the professional team met together, and it is our recommendation that we take advantage of state law and rebid this contract in the very near future, so it would come back by May 23rd. That gives us a couple of advantages. One, we have a little bit more data and knowledge now than we had before, in that we know that those 28 units, we have a certain date that they'll be coming in, which should make this package potentially more attractive to a contractor, knowing when the units are coming in that they can install. And so it is our recommendation that it be placed very quickly out for rebid, and that we reject the one bid that did come in. The second thing as well is with just one bid, you don't have very much data in terms of what the market is saying. So on those 2 reasons is why we're recommending to reject this bid and rebid it again.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Tom?
Yeah, just one other point regarding that. So the rebid bid opening will be on May 23, and in the interest of time, the construction manager and architect were suggesting that we have a special meeting to approve that contract, so we'll have to work on establishing what that date would be, because
Okay.
they don't believe that we can wait till June 11th.
Thanks. Thanks.
I
Tom.
was actually going to ask if there was a time frame impact on this project, so thank you for
And thank you for expediting it as well.
Okay, so we call the question?
Beth Barron?
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld?
Yes.
Daniel Dart?
Yes.
Jessica Deutsch?
Yes.
Bill Hare?
Yes.
Betsy Baglio?
Yes.
Brian McDonald?
Yes.
Gregory Stankiewicz?
Yes.
Michelle Tuck Ponder?
Yes.
Levin Spahn?
I'll abstain.
Abstain?
So that's motion carried, 1 abstention. Item 3, rejection of bid for electrical upgrades at Community Park, Johnson Park, and Littlebrook. Can I have a motion? Bill, second. Greg? Greg, would you like to say something?
Absolutely. This falls under the second category of when, in this case, we have to reject this bid. There were 2 bids that came in. Both our council found were non-compliant, in that in both cases, one of the addendas were not duly noted as being received by the 2 contractors who placed bids in. So the council said that we have to rebid this, and so that is why we are strongly recommending that this be rejected and also be rebid.
Thank you. Question? We'll call the question.
Beth Barron?
Yes.
Debbie Bronfeld?
Yes.
Daniel Dart?
Yes.
Jessica Deutsch?
Yes.
Bill Hare?
Yes.
Betsy Baglio?
Yes.
Brian McDonald?
Yes.
Gregory Stankiewicz?
Yes.
Michelle Tuck Ponder?
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn?
Abstain.
Motion passed, 9 to 1 abstention. 9 in favor, 1 abstention. Next item is a consent item, and I'm going to go through the consent items as we do each week, each month, whenever we meet. And I will read them, and if there's a question, someone can just let me know and I'll slow down. So item 4, acceptance of donation, Johnson Park PTO, funding of the amphitheater. Actually, I think we should say something about that in the meantime. Do you want to? We would, so I'll read it. Resolve that the Board of Education authorize the business administrator to accept a donation of $39,700 from Johnson Park PTO to fund the building of an amphitheater at Johnson Park Elementary School. Be it further resolved that the Board of Education acknowledges and offers appreciation and thanks to Johnson Park PTO for this generous donation. Greg, as Facilities Chair, do you want to say anything about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to again extend my gratitude and the gratitude on behalf of the Facilities Committee for this very, very generous partnership. I think this is a very good example of good news and good partnership, and we're very grateful for that, and we're very excited about this project going forward in one of our schools. So thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
And not to look a gift horse in the mouth, but where would this be located? Is it part of a long-term site plan for the school? And how would it be used?
Good question. Do you know the answer? Wait, Gary, would you like to comment on that?
Actually, it's going to be located if you're facing the building off to the left side.
Okay.
Just as you go up the hill to the play fields, right in that location.
And what is it going to be used for?
It's going to be, I can answer
yeah.
that. I mean, and you can, if you want to make a comment later, you can, because we have someone here from Johnson Park who's been very instrumental in putting this design forward. So it's an amphitheater, so it's going to be used for classroom performances, school performances. There's actually a hill that slopes up, so you can have a large audience, you can have a smaller group that could be there, so they're going to hopefully have the electric, so you can have some speakers, but it can be used for classroom, a single classroom. It can be used for a number of classrooms, some school events. So it's a wonderful performance area that's outside. Bring the community together there, and it also solves a problem that they were having with because it's on a slope already, and kids would come up and down that slope and it would be all muddy. So now we have beautiful, stairs that are going to be created or terraced, and so it's a nice outdoor performance area.
So $39,000 is the entire price of the construction?
No, I think there's.
That's just the labor.
Labor, and then there's materials.
What's the entire price? Does anybody know?
We have it. Where do you have it?
Yeah, it's and correct me if I'm wrong. It's $39,000 for the labor, and then it's around a little under $23,000 for material.
And that appeared in our budget last year?
We're not paying
No,
for
that's
it.
not in our
It's a
budget.
donation.
So they're going to raise the other
Yes.
Yeah, they are.
$20,000?
Yes,
Entirely.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
27,000, actually. I asked the
We
question
already-
earlier in the week,
Okay.
and it was
It's just it's flowing
27,000.
through us because it's on our property and we need, for insurance reasons. That's why the money's
Great.
coming through us.
Okay, so that is a consent item, so we could, if there's no further questions, we will move on. The next item, item 5, is also a consent item, but maybe we want to say a quick word about that. This is our contract with Epic Management, and it is the construction management service for the board's December 2019 referendum projects. And do we want to, Tom, did you want to say a couple just sentences about this?
Yeah, sure. The board had previously approved the execution of an agreement with Epic based upon the request for proposals that were submitted to various firms and the proposal that Epic had submitted. And we went through a very thorough process to make the recommendation for Epic. Once the board authorized that, our board attorney then began work to develop that contract that was consistent with the request for proposals as well as the proposal that was received from Epic. So the contract is in line with everything that we've seen.
And it's based on the standard Form AIA contract.
Yeah, with a lot of adjustments to reflect all of the things that we put in our proposal and their proposal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions? The next item is another consent, the travel and related expenses for 2018-19. Any questions? And number 7 is travel and related expenses for 2019-20. And again, these will have attachments which are part of our agenda, which we've had in advance of the meeting, so I'm not listing all the numbers or anything like that. We are now on to our consent vote, item N, to approve the consent agenda items. Do I have a motion?
I have a motion just to separate Epic from the other consent items.
Okay. Do we need a second for that? We can just do that, that's fine. Okay. So shall we vote first on all the items other than Epic? And can I have a motion for that? Brian and Dan? It's getting late. Brian and then Dan. Can we call the question? You want to?
Beth Barron?
Yes.
Debbie Brumfeld?
Yes.
Daniel Dart?
Yes.
Jessica Deutsch?
Yes.
Bill Hare?
Yes.
Betsy Cadler?
Yes.
Brian McDonald?
Yes.
Gregory Stankiewicz?
Yes.
Michelle Tuck Ponder?
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn?
Yes.
Motion carried. Unanimous. Next item would be the consent for Epic Construction. Can I have a motion? Brian, second. Bill? Any discussion? Well, we did that already, so I'm going to call the question.
Beth Barron?
Yes.
Let's see, Greg Stankiewicz?
Yes.
Betsy Baglio?
Yes.
She said yes.
She said yes.
Okay. Debbie Bromfeld?
Yes.
Daniel Dart?
No.
Jessica Deutsch?
Yes.
Bill Hare?
Yes.
Brian McDonald?
Yes.
Michelle Tuck Ponder?
Yes.
Evelyn Spahn?
Yes.
Motion passed 9-1. That takes us on to a public comment on open topics. Do we have anyone who wants to comment?
So quick.
Okay, Martha.
I just actually had a quick question about the budget. Does the DLI program and maybe the second teacher, any other supporting costs, is that included in the basic skills bilingual instruction part of the budget? I don't know if this is for Tom or anybody else knows, or that's part of the regular program, all of the costs associated. Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Not really.
I'm sorry.
Which expense bucket?
There were two, there was so the basic skills bilingual instruction, I think, was down at like 1.9 million. Yeah, I don't have the page. I'm
that.
sorry. So I was just wondering if the costs associated with DLI, just from my understanding, is part of that bilingual instruction, or it's considered a part of regular program? I think that was the other part that it seemed like it might be.
Do you know my guess is it's in regular instruction. Bilingual is a separate. Yeah.
That it's in regular?
Yes.
Okay. And then I just had one more question about DLI, kind of historically. My recollection, and I didn't do my research, was that we started that program to try to close achievement gap with our native Spanish speakers.
One major reason, yes.
Right, okay. And so that it only has, I think, about 25 native Spanish speakers right now in that program, was the last information I got from that school, I think is important.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the closing comments of the board. Are there anything? Then could I have a motion to adjourn? Betsy and Brian. Thank you. Meeting adjourned. We should vote to adjourn.